In a treacherous mountain region, where roars shook the air and flames engulfed trees, 3 experienced adventurers were risking their lives fighting a ferocious E-level dragon, a creature so massive that a mere flap of its wings sent rocks flying, while a flame from its throat could reduce an entire squad of guards to ashes in an instant. As the battle grew increasingly fierce, not far away in a peaceful countryside, Alwyn, a young man with a simple appearance, was enjoying the serenity of watching his vegetable field ripen. The glossy, purple eggplants glistening under the midday sun gave Al a sense of fulfillment after a morning of diligent cultivation. Just as he finished weeding and tilling the soil, the skill system signaled that he had completed an advanced farming quest, instantly elevating all his agricultural skills to the highest level. Shortly after, Testa, a close friend, came to chat with Al. Hearing that his fishing, aquaculture, gardening, and animal husbandry skills had all reached superhuman levels, Testa initially thought it was a joke. But when he recalled how Al could process an entire school of fish with just one slash as they surfaced, amazement began to spread through his mind. At times, Al only needed to raise his fishing rod, and the fish would be sliced into sashimi pieces while still hovering in the air. Moreover, when combining multiple skills, Al unexpectedly received the evolved title Nature's Beloved, something even the sages or mythical warriors had never heard of. Testa was speechless when he saw Al's attack stat soar to an unimaginable 17,367 points, far surpassing all honored warriors. While their conversation was still ongoing, Al suddenly remembered he needed to transport his freshly harvested produce to the capital. He immediately boarded his horse cart, carrying carrots, bunches of green onions, and baskets of vegetables, beginning his journey to the city. On the way, while casually munching on a carrot, Al accidentally encountered the gigantic dragon flying in the distance, the creature that the adventurers from the morning still couldn't defeat. The exhausted warriors had no choice but to retreat. Al, curious about his true power, tried throwing his half-eaten carrot toward the massive beast as a test. No one could have expected that this very carrot would explode powerfully, instantly incinerating the dragon, then returning to his hand as if equipped with a magical return mechanism. Feeling slightly uneasy about this unusual effect, Al continued his journey and quickly reached the capital's gates. After presenting valid papers identifying himself as a farmer, he was permitted to enter the city. Just as his cart rolled onto the main street, a mysterious knight suddenly rushed by, dragging a struggling blonde girl. Al observed for a moment before taking decisive action, weaving through the crowded street to rescue the girl from her kidnapper. Without needing weapons, Al used only his movement observation skills and quick reflexes to subdue the opponent, leaving the guard team no time to react. The grateful girl hurried over to thank him, but Al maintained a cold demeanor, concerned that lingering too long would delay his delivery. As Al prepared to leave, the royal guards suddenly blocked his path. While he was still confused about what was happening, the blonde girl from earlier appeared, revealing her true identity as Princess Thalia Magis, the current head of the royal family. With a solemn tone, Thalia expressed her wish for Al to join the royal guard, because after reviewing the morning's battle, she discovered the man Al had defeated had a combat index of 500, a number higher than even professional cavalry commanders. Ordinary people typically scored around 50, while experienced adventurers struggled to exceed 130. For legendary heroes, a combat index of around 1,000 was considered the peak. This made Thalia suspect that Al's true power exceeded the understanding of the entire combat world. Not wanting to be drawn into political intrigue, Al made the excuse that he needed to return home to recover mentally by growing vegetables due to the pressure of village expectations. Though disappointed, Thalia still tried to persuade him by offering management of a large field near the palace if he agreed to assist the dynasty in the coming period. Al certainly didn't want anyone to know his actual stat exceeding 65,000, a number that could throw the entire world into chaos if revealed. While their conversation was still interrupted, the adventurers who had escaped from the dragon battle returned to report. They recounted that whoever eliminated the E-level creature used strange weapons never seen before, and the only thing investigators found at the scene were the wheel tracks of an ordinary horse cart. Thalia began connecting the events, gradually feeling something wasn't right, but before she could question him, Al had disappeared into the capital's crowded streets. Right after, a guard hurriedly approached the princess, reporting that from the border region, a horde of giant golems and battle dragons had appeared, seemingly controlled by some force, currently marching straight toward the royal capital. The descriptions from the front lines terrified everyone, as the scene was no different than an expedition from hell advancing toward them. The king, who had personally signed a peace treaty with the demon race after the demon lord Beelzebub was eliminated, couldn't explain this situation. According to analysis from Reeks, a trusted courtier, it was possible that remnants of the demon race, resentful of their past defeat, were seeking revenge. Leading this group was a former demon army commander named Rex Romeo, who had played a key role in proposing the peace treaty years ago. This astonished the entire royal court, as it could all have been an elaborate plot to deceive the court, creating conditions for evil demons to infiltrate and seize power from within. The situation became extremely tense, forcing all defense plans of the kingdom to be deployed in the short time remaining. King Romeo felt utterly bewildered by current developments, as he was the one who had proposed the peace treaty with the demon race. The rapid reversal of events left him confused. Meanwhile, Faye, a loyal courtier, began to suspect that this had been calculated from the beginning to paralyze the kingdom's vigilance. According to his speculation, everything from the dragon attack to the princess's kidnapping attempt was Romeo's calculated distraction, creating favorable conditions for another hidden force to act. Faye believed Romeo might have discovered early on that the hero who destroyed the demon lord was no longer in the human realm, so he decided to act during the most chaotic moment. As the situation grew increasingly tense, Faye immediately advised the king and princess to quickly withdraw to preserve their forces. However, Romeo, a king who valued his people, immediately refused, unable to accept abandoning his subjects amid danger. He believed he must take responsibility as he was the one who signed that peace treaty. This decisive action, contrary to his survival instinct, made all the soldiers behind him admire the king's patriotism and love for his people. They unanimously requested that he must survive, for if such a king fell, the country would lose its guiding lighthouse. Faced with the urgency and loyalty of his military and people, the king agreed to retreat with the escort team. Meanwhile, Alwyn, the eggplant-growing farmer who loved nature most in the kingdom, had just returned home when he accidentally broke his door handle. Though deciding to fix it the next day, he had barely sat down to rest when Testa, his close friend, rushed over to inform him that a horde of giant monsters was approaching the village, forcing villagers to evacuate to a nearby cave. Alwyn suddenly remembered the next day was harvest day, so he immediately rushed to the field to check the situation. Fortunately, his fields remained intact. Observing carefully, Alwyn noticed the monsters weren't interested in the village or crops, but were heading straight for the royal capital. He sighed with relief, believing the knight's defense was sufficient and he needn't intervene. However, another thought flashed in his mind: if the capital fell, the produce he had worked so hard to cultivate couldn't be sold, making all his efforts meaningless. At this time, the king's troops under Faye's guidance had reached a dead end. While everyone was still confused about which way to proceed, Faye suddenly turned on them, drawing his weapon to attack the king. This shocking betrayal caught the soldiers off guard. A few tried to draw their swords in defense, but were quickly subdued. Faye now revealed his true identity. He wasn't an ordinary person, but a disguised demon, actually Romeo, the mastermind behind the entire cruel plan. He claimed he didn't need to destroy the kingdom like the previous demon lord, but would seize the throne by impersonating the real king to rule, thereby turning humans into tools of the demon race without anyone knowing. Immediately, Romeo attacked the king. Fortunately, the king carried a protective charm, a magical necklace, creating a barrier against fatal blows. Nevertheless, the protective circle was gradually weakening. Princess Fal Usmi decided to support her father with her own magic, combining powers to repel the enemy's magic. However, Romeo's overwhelming strength completely dominated them. He still didn't understand why his plans to capture the princess and defeat the dragon had been foiled. Just as he was about to deliver the final blow, Alwyn appeared unexpectedly, striking his hoe hard into the ground, creating a violent tremor that sent the monsters flying. He introduced himself with a simple but proud name: National Farmer, Protector of Fields, representative of the spirit of nature, love, and agricultural passion. Without needing ultimate weapons, Alwyn used his everyday hoe to block Romeo's attack, then threw the enemy's sword back into his face, sending him flying into the mountainside. Romeo immediately realized that the person who had foiled his plans was this strange farmer. Enraged to madness, he eliminated all his remaining minions to absorb their energy, transforming into his strongest form with a stat level reaching 78, far exceeding normal levels. The princess was terrified seeing his new power. Romeo laughed loudly, declaring he would end everything this time. However, before he could launch his attack, Alwyn had already rushed forward like lightning, delivering an extremely powerful punch that knocked Romeo unconscious instantly. Seeing their leader defeated with just one blow, the remaining monsters fled in panic. The next morning, the king personally rewarded Alwyn for his great service in saving the country and protecting the royal family. He simply explained that he acted because he worried his produce wouldn't sell if the capital collapsed. The king very much wanted to invite Alwyn to work at the palace, even ready to bestow any title he desired, as he recognized the young man's value exceeded that of 100 others combined. Fal Usmi, knowing Alwyn didn't want to abandon his farming life, accepted his wishes. However, the princess still didn't give up hope of occasionally visiting to further persuade him. As a reward for this feat, she proposed giving Alwyn management of a vast land outside the royal capital. Though he liked the idea very much, he still had to accept the accompanying condition of registering with the Adventurers Guild, as many surrounding areas were still threatened by monsters. Considering the mutual benefits between farming and earning additional work, Alwyn happily agreed. What he couldn't have anticipated was that the land he was about to receive actually belonged to the royal family. On a seemingly more peaceful day than usual, Alwyn, the young farmer with strength far exceeding everyday standards, had the honor of accompanying Princess Fal Usmia to explore the central market of the capital. With his genuine nature, he quickly bought 2 skewers of grilled meat to offer Fal Usmia, trying to display some gallant manners. Although inwardly concerned that the princess leaving the palace might cause a commotion, Fal Usmia reassured him that she had arranged everything properly, having her maid Aobai impersonate her at the palace. According to her, the purpose of the trip was to understand the lives of the people, but to Alwyn, it felt more like a casual stroll than a fact-finding mission. After a few rounds around the market, the princess took him to the Adventurers Guild in the capital to assist with his integration. Although Alwyn still firmly wanted to maintain his identity as a genuine farmer, he agreed to join the guild as a way to repay the reward land he received after his previous feat of eliminating danger. Before entering the guild, Fal Usmia prepared a special hairpin for him to disguise her royal identity. Just as they stepped into the main hall, Alwyn was warmly welcomed by the guild master after hearing rumors spreading about his extraordinary power. Helen, the girl directly responsible for registration procedures, guided him to complete all the paperwork. Before he could introduce himself, Alwyn's stomach suddenly growled with hunger. Helen immediately offered him a cake she had made herself. While chatting, Helen was surprised to learn that this farmer wanted to become an adventurer. Alwyn honestly shared that this was just a side job. His main work only involved growing vegetables and raising fish. At that moment, the group of 3 adventurers who had previously fought the dragon happened to be present and immediately recognized the young man who had turned the S-class monster into ashes. Nevertheless, Alwyn remained modest, claiming he had just been lucky to throw some carrots into the sky. Helen quickly introduced Alwyn to some potential teammates: Zach, a muscular bald young man, Lamia, an energetic girl with a strong personality, and Luke, a quiet archer. Lamia showed clear excitement at the prospect of eliminating monsters for justice with Alwyn. After a brief introduction, the group left to prepare for a new mission. Alwyn was still worried that his farming work would be disrupted if he got too involved with the adventuring profession. Nevertheless, he wanted to try a light mission. Helen decided to assign Alwyn a low-level task of collecting 10 branches of Mio grass in the Jizim forest, an important ingredient used to make recovery potions. She also carefully gave him a list of monsters to avoid in that area. Finding Alwyn's outfit too plain, Helen enthusiastically lent him a magic-infused cloak. Though somewhat reluctant, faced with her insistence, Alwyn tried it on and unexpectedly left Helen stunned by his extremely cool appearance. She decided to give him the cloak as an encouraging gift, while Alwyn just silently appreciated the free item before quickly setting off. When stepping out of the guild, he was quite surprised that no one recognized Fal Usmia despite her accompanying him. However, since the Jizim forest contained many dangers, he suggested she return first. The princess agreed to leave, promising to continue bothering him tomorrow. In the afternoon, while diligently searching for Mio grass, Alwyn accidentally picked up a strange scale. What puzzled him was that no monster in this area possessed such scales. Right after that, the warning system appeared, alerting that this area had orcs entering their breeding season, extremely dangerous. Before he could react, a female orc suddenly appeared behind him and lunged forward with a lustful expression. He almost became a victim when Zach timely appeared and rescued him. Alwyn couldn't help but feel grateful for escaping the scenario of depleted life force. Shortly after, Luke and Lamia also arrived. The friends shared that scales like these were highly valuable, while warning about the recent appearance of a mysterious black dragon, a creature that usually only inhabits deep water areas. They believed this might be a sign that an unrecorded monster species was invading the area. As night fell, the group clearly sensed the heavy presence of a creature far beyond the ordinary. A giant black shadow appeared, ignoring their existence, just silently gliding past with absolutely overwhelming pressure. Alwyn held his breath to check its stats, and the result made him pale. Meanwhile, Helen, who remained in the city, suddenly had a nightmare during sleep. Her face so pale that the servant ran in panic to raise the alarm. When she woke up, Helen was confused because all memories of the previous day had completely disappeared. As if something had erased her memory of recent events, Mrs. Gorn, who had cared for and raised Helen since childhood after noticing her seriously declining health condition, advised Helen to temporarily pause her work at the Adventurers Guild to rest and stabilize. At that time, Alwyn unexpectedly came looking for her, reporting an urgent matter. He, along with Zack, Lamia, and Luke, went to meet the guild master to report about a gigantic creature they had encountered in the Gizim forest the day before. It was a dragon possessing a combat index up to 230,000, a number sufficient to make the entire nation collapse in an instant if it actually attacked. Alwyn and the group believed the entity belonged to the evil dragon, a legendary monster species that had been eliminated in an ancient great war. As soon as she heard the name Evil Dragon, Helen suddenly felt a severe headache, as if an old memory was being forced to return. Despite her unstable condition, she still tried to stay to continue grasping information. Lamia described that just being near that entity for a few seconds was enough to make one suffocate with fear, a pressure never before seen from any previous monster. Zack believed the entire Gizim forest area should be immediately locked down to prevent casualties. Alwyn then took out the scale he had collected the day before, the one he had picked up while completing the Mio grass collection mission. As soon as she saw the scale, Helen immediately froze, then collapsed from panic, buried memories from many years suddenly resurfacing, leaving her unable to resist. While Helen was being cared for, Alwyn stayed to ask Mrs. Gorn more about her health condition. She revealed that Helen had never remembered anything about her past, except her name since childhood. When found 12 years ago, she only carried a strange cloak, the very one Alwyn now wore on his body, given to him by her during their first meeting. The story made Alwyn associate with the possibility that Helen had some connection with the evil dragon that had just appeared. Recognizing the approaching danger, he decided to investigate deeper, although not yet having enough power to confront such a creature. To reassure Mrs. Gorn, Alwyn affirmed that he only wanted to search for information in the library rather than foolishly diving into adventure. Hearing this, Mrs. Gorn gave him a few recovery potion bottles as support. Shortly after, a messenger boy came to hand deliver a letter to Alwyn from his mother. He was surprised, not understanding how she knew his current location. As he was preparing to leave, the messenger unexpectedly turned back, briefly introducing himself as Rix before disappearing in the blink of an eye. With a confused state of mind, Alwyn went to the library to research, but despite searching all day, couldn't find any valuable information related to the evil dragon. The creature's power level of 230,000 made him feel uneasy, while a strong opponent like Romeo, whom he had defeated, only had 5,000 combat points. If the evil dragon truly fully awakened, all surrounding lands would no longer be safe. Recalling Mrs. Gorn saying she had found Helen by the riverside more than a decade ago, Alwyn decided to check the damage records from that time. However, with his current G rank, the librarian refused to provide classified data. He tried begging, but with no result, as the library rules were extremely strict. At this moment, Fal Usmia appeared. Hearing he was searching for information at the library, she immediately came to help. As a princess, she used her royal privilege to grant access permission for Alwyn. The two then researched documents about events that occurred 15 years ago in Riverside Villages, the location where Helen had been found. Fal Usmia discovered a suspicious location, the village of Hono, a place that had been completely destroyed in an event with unclear causes. When Alwyn reviewed old reports, he discovered that at that time, Hono village had been devastated by an unidentified entity. After collecting the remaining scale samples, scholars of that time concluded that the perpetrator of the tragedy was the evil dragon, an immortal entity born from darkness, despair, and destruction. In history, the evil dragon had been eliminated by the Holy Dragon, the only natural enemy that could stop it. However, if the evil dragon was truly resurrected again, the world would fall back into the vortex of extinction. To avoid causing panic among the people, the entire event from that year was concealed, not even permitted to be recorded in royal historical books. Recognizing the severity, Alwyn decided to directly survey the Hono village area, now just ruins, the next day. The following morning, Alwyn and Fal Usmia set out. Under the princess's guidance, they quickly approached the remains of the village. Everything seemed to still bear the traces of a disaster that occurred more than a decade ago. Unexpectedly, a strange sound called out Alwyn's name. He immediately followed it and discovered an ancient tombstone. Right after, a boy appeared. While Alwyn was communicating, Fal Usmia showed concern seeing him talking to himself. It turned out the boy was a ghost named Gi, who had been waiting a long time for someone to listen to him amid these dilapidated ruins. The cloak that Alwyn wore on his shoulders was no ordinary item. It was the last remaining relic of Gi, the boy who had fallen during the massacre in Hono village years ago. Before departing from the world, Gi had been given this cloak by his father, with the pride of a child who loved fantasy stories, hoping one day to become a real hero like Harry Potter. When realizing the cloak contained magic that helped see spirits, Alwyn decided to put it on Fall Usmia, not out of romance or to express feelings, but so the princess could see with her own eyes the presence of Gi's spirit, who was still lingering in the old forest waiting to see his sister again. The sudden closeness between Alwyn and Fall Usmia made her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but the atmosphere was quickly broken when Gi's spirit appeared, startling Fall Usmia into screaming. Alwyn quickly covered her mouth with his hand, giving the boy a chance to say everything he couldn't before. The boy confirmed that Helen, currently living in the royal capital, was his biological sister, the only survivor after the tragedy in the small village where they once lived. Alwyn told Gi about Helen's current situation, that she had lost all memories of her past, remembering nothing related to family or the disaster from years ago. Although hearing this made Gi downcast, he sympathized with his sister, only worried that with damaged memories, Helen would easily fall into the evil dragon's emotional trap. In the past, Gi dreaming of becoming a warrior, someone who could stand up to protect everyone from injustice and monsters. Although Helen always advised her brother not to take risks, saying that warrior games weren't for children, Gi remained steadfast in his chosen path. To Helen, he was the only family member left, so her worry never subsided. On a fateful afternoon, when both had just left the village to gather herbs, the evil dragon suddenly appeared. Before they could return, the village had been wiped out, with parents and villagers leaving no survivors. Knowing they couldn't fight against such a great force, Gi led his sister to hide from the enemy's sight. In the chaos, Helen tripped, unable to continue running. She told her brother to run alone to save his life. However, Gi didn't do that. The bloodthirsty dragon caught up, rushing forward with the intention of starting its bloody feast with Helen herself. At that very moment, Gi swung the small sword his father had forged for him, stabbing directly into the evil dragon's eye. Although this wound wasn't enough to shift the monster's power, it drew its attention to the unsubmissive courage of the small human before it. In its anger, the evil dragon didn't immediately kill Helen, but issued a malicious curse. After 15 years, it would return to where she lived, bringing death to everyone existing around her, so she would have to live in haunting trauma for life. Right after, Gi fell, although his body was no longer intact. His eyes still contained no fear. The evil dragon, recognizing that such a strong soul wouldn't easily fade, used magic to imprison Gi's spirit at that very place, turning him into an immortal witness to the chain of tragedies his sister would have to bear later. Many years passed. Gi could neither leave nor transcend, only watching from afar, waiting for the day someone could deliver his final message to Helen. The boy's spirit clearly told Alwyn an important truth after each massacre. The evil dragon deliberately left one survivor the purpose not only to spread fear, but also to sow deep despair in the heart of the one left behind, thereby continuing to nurture its power. While being eaten, Gi realized the entire operation mechanism of the monster's power. It wasn't simply a dragon, but an evil entity specializing in absorbing negative emotions. The more sadness, anger, hatred, and loss swirled within a person, the stronger the evil dragon became. Now, Helen had entered its direct target, someone gradually remembering everything, accompanied by surging feelings of guilt for what had happened. Understanding this, Gi entrusted all his memories and wishes to Alwyn, hoping that he, with a heart unclouded by hatred, could stop this cycle of death, save Helen, as well as protect all those who had survived after the pain. Alwyn, although carrying rare courage, couldn't avoid feeling worried when facing a powerful entity like the evil dragon, one that had sown bone-deep pain for generations. He began to doubt whether he had enough strength to defeat such an evil creature. However, the final message from Gi's spirit echoing in his mind made Alwyn calm down. He didn't need to defeat the dragon with pure strength. The important thing was not to let it absorb more despair from others. The source of the evil dragon's dark energy came from deep negative emotions, which could be neutralized by hope, faith, and love. By awakening these positive emotions, Alwyn could make the ancient creature gradually weaken. As soon as he understood the mission he had to shoulder, Alwyn didn't hesitate, carrying Fall Usmia and running straight back to the royal capital. That day marked exactly 15 years since the evil dragon had made its blood appointment with Helen. Fall Usmia showed displeasure at Alwyn's carrying style, which made her lose all princess demeanor, as if being carried like a sack, not being cherished at all. However, the urgent atmosphere forced her to temporarily set aside her discomfort, just managing to set foot back in the city before the fateful moment. Both immediately divided to take action. Fall Usmia ordered the army to quickly evacuate civilians, while announcing the appearance of the evil dragon to avoid widespread casualties. Meanwhile, Alwyn ran straight to Helen to fulfill Gi's instruction, conveying the final hope to his sister who was immersed in torment. However, when Alwyn arrived, Helen's room was empty. She couldn't wait anymore. With a knife in hand, Helen had silently left the royal capital, heading straight into the Gizem forest where she first faced the dragon years ago. The memories sealed in her mind had finally been released. Now, Helen remembered everything, from the image of her brother standing in front of the evil dragon to the fear that made her unable to move at that time. She believed it was because of her weakness that Gi had to die. When the evil dragon appeared, it didn't attack directly but used words to evoke the wound in Helen's heart, skillfully recreating that tragic moment like a flashback, drowning the victim in guilt. Under that pressure, Helen collapsed mentally, begging the dragon to take her life in exchange for peace for the people. The evil dragon seemed pleased with the level of despair Helen was carrying, but still revealed that even if she ended her own life, it would still burn the entire royal capital, because its real target wasn't just her, it wanted to spread suffering. At that moment, Alwyn appeared just in time, preventing Helen from committing suicide just as she was about to end herself. Though avoiding the knife's path, Alwyn was struck hard by the evil dragon. If not for the cloak that once belonged to Gi, perhaps he would have become a pile of ashes by now. Not retreating, Alwyn stood up, clearly stating his position that he didn't come here to die with Helen, but to protect her as Gi had done years ago. Bearing the identity of a farmer who had maxed out VIP skills to their roots, Alwyn was ready to face this, even knowing he couldn't defeat an ancient creature with just ordinary fists. The evil dragon went crazy at such stubbornness, attacking continuously with claws, fangs, and even magic fire. Despite being blown away numerous times, Alwyn still stood firm, never falling. Helen stood behind, witnessing everything, both heartbroken and terrified. She begged Alwyn to stop, not wanting another person to die because of her. But Alwyn affirmed that everyone has the right to choose how to live and fight. No one is bound by others' mistakes. He told about Gi's spirit, that the boy had never blamed his sister, but instead asked Alwyn to convey hope to Helen on his behalf. Gi was proud of having sacrificed to protect his most beloved person, and if given the chance to choose again, he would not change that decision. Helen burst into tears hearing that. Her heart, seemingly frozen for 15 years, appeared to be warmed again. When she stood up, the hope blazing in her eyes inadvertently reduced the evil dragon's power level. Alwyn saw the magic power chart plummeting, immediately understanding this was the opportunity to counterattack. While the dragon hadn't regained its balance, Alwyn launched a punch with all the skills accumulated after years of cultivating, digging soil, and harvesting, a punch so powerful, it caused the evil dragon to fall. He turned back joyfully, intending to share the joy with Helen. However, unexpectedly, in that surprising moment, Helen drew her knife and suddenly stabbed directly at Alwyn. After taking the fatal blow, Al frantically took out a recovery potion from his bag, hoping to salvage the situation. However, due to the strong impact, his hands wouldn't stop shaking, causing the potion bottle to fall from his grasp and shatter on the ground. Observing this, Helen immediately lunged forward, attacking mercilessly, putting Al in an extremely difficult predicament. While trying to treat his own wound, he was also confused about why Helen was acting so ruthlessly. Without receiving any explanation, Al became even more bewildered, only able to desperately dodge her attacks. Just when everything seemed about to end, a pair of brilliant wings suddenly appeared, blocking the strike that had just been launched. The holy dragon, quiet for so long, had finally awakened and intervened. It quickly explained to Al that Helen was being possessed and controlled by the evil dragon. And now that it had been exposed, the evil energy within her was erupting violently. Unable to stand by any longer, the holy dragon decided to bestow all of its power to Al, a force that not only helped heal wounds, but also carried the ability to regenerate. However, this energy transfer caused the holy dragon's form to weaken gradually, almost dissipating. Meanwhile, Falliable, after helping evacuate the citizens from the danger zone, chose to stay behind to protect the royal capital, while also preventing anyone foolish enough to act alone against the evil dragon. The power granted to Al by the holy dragon wasn't simply a healing spell. It also carried purifying properties, capable of rescuing Helen from the clutches of evil energy. Despite being challenged by the evil dragon's spirit, which clearly knew Al's feelings for Helen, he remained determined not to let weakness make him falter. Faced with this difficult situation, Al didn't choose to back down. Instead, he concentrated all his strength into a punch straight to the opponent's face, knocking out the evil dragon that was possessing Helen's body. He didn't act out of anger, but because he saw in that girl's eyes a silent plea for help, a desire to be rescued from the darkness. When Al lowered his guard after the victory, the remaining evil energy unexpectedly entered his body. Thinking the battle had completely tipped in its favor, The evil dragon's spirit laughed triumphantly, declaring it now had full control over the body of a powerful person. However, the gentle, honest farmer nature in Al was what completely baffled the evil dragon's spirit. His heart was filled with faith in the land, crops, and love, with no darkness for the evil to cling to. The holy dragon seized this opportunity to return, completely purifying the remaining evil energy in Helen, before dissipating along with the enemy spirit, leaving behind pure light gradually spreading, sweeping away all the dark clouds covering the sky. Al was taken to the medical room, where Fal and Helen were anxiously waiting. When he regained consciousness, both were extremely relieved. Helen couldn't contain her emotions and rushed to embrace Al, regardless of all the gazes. She announced that she had now completely escaped from the evil dragon, but had also inherited some powers from that spirit. The holy dragon, having used all its strength to purify, had completely disappeared. Fal was very surprised to learn that both had encountered the legendary holy dragon. While Al worriedly inquired about Helen's condition, she reassured him that she now had complete control over her new powers. To prove it, Helen transformed her limbs into a dragon hybrid form, controlling them with great flexibility. Although the evil dragon's power was gone, its traces in her body still existed, becoming part of her new strength. Initially, Helen felt fearful, but after remembering the final advice from her brother that Al had passed on, she decided to live fully, using this power to help others, rather than letting it become a curse. While the two were intimately conversing, Fal's eyes flashed with a hint of displeasure. Helen suddenly remembered and questioned the relationship between her and Fal. The princess quickly replied that they were childhood friends, making Al somewhat awkward, but he didn't correct her. At that moment, the guild master and the others entered the room, worriedly checking on Helen. Bargain tried to maintain order, but couldn't prevent the excited atmosphere when everyone discovered Al had defeated the evil dragon. Both Wretch and Lamia praised him highly, especially Lamia, who didn't hesitate to use this to tease him, comparing him with the achievements of her old team. The situation became so boisterous that Bargain had to sternly demand everyone keep order. When everyone quieted down, Al stood up declaring he had fully recovered. Wretch immediately suggested throwing a celebration party, with the condition that the guild master would pay. Though somewhat reluctant, Bargain agreed. Fal affirmed that after this battle, the royal palace would certainly have worthy rewards for them, forgetting that she needed to keep her princess identity secret. However, no one cared about that at the moment. Everyone unanimously raised their glasses, praising Al's courage. When the guild master proposed a toast to congratulate him for his good qualities, no one responded, until he confirmed that all party expenses would be covered by him. Then, cheers echoed throughout the room. While everyone was happily raising glasses to celebrate victory, Al discreetly chose a cold lemonade instead of wine. The simple reason being that tomorrow morning he had to wake up early to harvest potatoes in the southern field. This action caught Lamia's attention, and she quickly prevented others from getting Al drunk because she understood that farming was never a casual matter for him. Fal Yabel, of course, had already recognized the true purpose behind Al's calm exterior, and clicked her tongue, advising him that resting for one day wouldn't affect much. Al thought briefly, then nodded in agreement, not forgetting to thank Fal for always understanding. At that moment, a strange emotion arose in the princess's heart, because it was Al's perseverance that gave her enough courage to stand up and lead the guild to continue fighting. In the corner of the yard, Helen was excitedly showing off her transformation ability by changing her limbs, creating various jokes to entertain everyone, contributing to making the party more lively. Early the next morning, Al left his bed early to prepare for fieldwork as usual. Not wanting to miss the harvest season, he asked Testa to help gather crops on schedule. His companion walked along thinking that Al must be very tired having to simultaneously farm and handle affairs in the royal capital. However, Al's cheerful face made Testa change his assessment. Doing what he loved was never a burden for him. At that moment, a well-dressed man named Bill Tealik came by, holding a letter for Al. Not wanting to waste time, he delivered the letter and left immediately. When seeing his father's familiar handwriting, Al immediately became worried, thinking his family must be facing something important to contact him so urgently. In the letter, his parents talked about moving to the royal capital, then mentioned how Al had once insisted on not leaving the village to continue farming, making them very surprised about his sudden change of decision recently. They even wondered if Al had taken an interest in someone, which was why he moved to the city. At the end of the letter, his parents expressed their desire to meet him and had prepared travel expenses. After reading, Al was lost in thought. How long had it been since he went home? He couldn't even remember. Feeling guilty, he immediately decided to complete all pending missions in the guild before departing. After finishing his fieldwork, he stopped by the market as usual. There, a ripe red tomato displayed on the shelf captured his full attention. Al bought one, tasted it, and was amazed by its distinctively rich flavor. That delicious taste awakened all his senses. Without hesitation, Al turned to ask the seller about the origin of these tomatoes. The shop owner was somewhat cautious, but still revealed they were grown in Jugo, an agricultural area that was applying a special fertilizer making vegetables superior in quality. Upon hearing this, Al immediately ran to the Adventurers Guild to ask Helen to change his mission. Seeing all so urgent, Helen mistakenly thought he had grown tired of the guild or of her, and was planning to quit. He quickly explained that the real reason was because his parents lived in Jugo, and he wanted to take the opportunity to visit them, while also learning about that special fertilizer. This request initially surprised Helen, but after thinking for a moment, she decided to take over Al's part of the mission. Although she was the guild's main receptionist, she still spent a few days each week outside on extermination mission. Thanks to the new powers she had recently acquired, hunting with Helen now was nothing short of a pleasure, helping her train herself while contributing to the guild. Because of this, Al could leave with peace of mind. When preparing to depart, Fal accidentally met him at the gate, guessing that Al was taking on a mission and expressing her wish to accompany him. He had to explain this wasn't a work trip, but simply a visit home, which made Fal even more curious and insistent on going along to meet his parents. Al disagreed, concerned about the princess's true identity, so he just smiled politely and quickly left. On the way, Al was full of excitement at the prospect of discovering the secret to growing such delicious tomatoes. Unfortunately, midway he accidentally encountered a strange creature, an orc with a rough appearance. Seeing it reach out its hand, Al naively thought the opponent had goodwill and wanted to make friends, so he wasn't on guard. Little did he know that this orc was a skilled troublemaker from the pottery village specializing in causing destruction. Seeing the dangerous situation, Al ran for his life to preserve his dignity. However, he couldn't run far before being caught and almost faced an embarrassing situation. At that very moment, a powerful attack suddenly struck down, causing the orc to collapse on the spot. The person who had intervened was a strange girl, appearing impressively amid a context that couldn't be more awkward. Nearly losing his manhood for a second time made Al Wayne break out in cold sweat, his heart racing chaotically from the massive mental shock. Seeing his pale face, the girl in front of him quickly offered Al a sip of water to help him calm down. Noticing that he was traveling alone through this dangerous forest, she couldn't help but wonder why. Al gently replied that he was an adventurer, though his life frequently encountered bad luck when meeting orcs with unusual preferences. When she realized they were about the same age, the girl introduced herself as Rurushi Farhan and expressed her delight in meeting Al. Coincidentally, both were heading to the Juoth Mountains, so Rurushi suggested traveling together, in case anyone else along the way targeted his questionable chastity. Al felt somewhat embarrassed, as it seemed odd for a girl to protect a boy. Rurushi reassured him that if he tried anything inappropriate, she would show him the inherited power from her legendary hero bloodline, though she was confident Al wasn't the deceitful type. Although initially Al thought there was nothing likable about himself, when he spontaneously complimented Rurushi on her beauty, the girl broke into a radiant smile. Afraid he had misspoken, Al changed the subject, suggesting they leave quickly as he didn't want to encounter any more orcs. From afternoon until evening, Al began to sense monster beasts hiding nearby. This premonition quickly became reality when both simultaneously felt something approaching. They immediately took defensive positions, ready to confront whatever it was. However, the person who appeared turned out to be Bill Tealik, the professional letter carrier from the Adventurers Guild. Al didn't understand why Bill would track him all the way to the Jizim forest, but for a professional like him, long distances were no obstacle. After receiving the letter, Al sighed and told Rurushi about how his mother had sent many letters, reminding him to come home. Although his reason for returning to his homeland was to visit family, learning about the special fertilizer used for growing tomatoes was more important. Possessing superior strength yet immersed in agricultural knowledge, Al made it difficult for Rurushi to fully comprehend his interest. After some conversation, Al asked about her circumstances since she was traveling alone without any relatives. Rurushi quietly replied that she had no one left, then pulled an entire camping tent out of a purse as small as a needle hole. Al was astonished, not understanding how such a tiny bag could hold so much equipment, but Rurushi simply stated that since this was anime, no explanation was necessary. It was simply one of the items passed down from her ancestors, direct descendants of the legendary hero who had once defeated the Demon Lord. At that moment, Al's stomach growled with hunger, so they decided to cook on the spot. The soup Rurushi prepared matched Al's taste so well that he couldn't stop praising it, even beginning to analyze the nutritional components of the potatoes simmering in the pot. When Al asked why she wanted to go to Juoth, Rurushi revealed that she was on a journey to strengthen her powers after hearing from a merchant that a series of mysterious accidents had occurred in that area, with survivors mentioning demon tribe figures. She wanted to verify the truth herself. Al was concerned, because after all, Rurushi was a girl traveling alone, and it would be dangerous if something unfortunate happened. Hearing someone worry about her for the first time in her life, Rurushi froze like a statue, then slowly thanked him for that rare concern. As night had fallen, Rurushi suggested they rest. When she saw Al planning to sleep on the ground, she couldn't help but be shocked. He maintained his stance that men and women should keep their distance and not share a tent. However, Rurushi feared that sleeping outside would make him vulnerable to monster attacks, so she tried to persuade him. Moreover, she said that she had always dreamed that during one of her journeys, she would talk with someone under the moonlight until they both fell asleep. Rurushi had prepared 2 mattresses to fulfill this dream. Al had no other choice but to accept. Yet before he could say anything, Rurushi had already fallen asleep. Al was about to wish her good night, but that night became a nightmare for him. Rurushi had a very aggressive sleeping habit, not only kicking him in vulnerable areas, but also punching him throughout the night. The next morning, they finally reached Jugo. Al's body was completely battered, while Rurushi didn't remember any of her unconscious attacks. This was Al's first time setting foot in this place. Rurushi couldn't hide her surprise seeing him in the role of a genuine farmer who had apparently never been here before. She expressed concern that it would be dangerous if he wandered around alone, so she proactively escorted Al into the city before parting ways. Before leaving, Rurushi expressed her desire to become Al's personal guard, as she was clear about her serious intentions. Al responded by saying he needed a few days to research the new fertilizer and visit his parents. When Rurushi completed her investigation mission, they could return to the capital together. Hearing this, Rurushi was overjoyed and marked the location of her inn so Al could easily contact her. Only after seeing him off did she feel comfortable leaving the area. While Al Wayne quickly headed to his parents' home to visit after a long time away, Rurushi Farhan devoted her entire mind to investigating the whereabouts of the demon tribe based on rumors once told by a merchant. She actively questioned local people around the Jugo area about any suspicious signs related to demons, but no one had valuable information. Their silence made her begin to doubt whether she had been deceived by a boaster. However, if there truly were no demon tribes, that would actually be a good thing for Rurushi. Nevertheless, painful memories from the past about people's criticism remained deeply imprinted in her mind, making it difficult for her to let go. Thus, she was determined to investigate thoroughly herself to find the truth behind the rumors. Unexpectedly, Rurushi heard a desperate scream coming from a part of the forest and immediately rushed to the area. There, she met a young girl in a state of panic, who told her that her younger sister had been kidnapped by suspected demon tribe members and taken deep into the Illusion Forest. Without hesitation, Rurushi immediately pursued in the indicated direction, sensing that this could be the key to tracking the true whereabouts of the monster beasts. Meanwhile, Al had just arrived at his front door, not even having time to ring the bell when from inside, a lightning-fast beam of light rushed out and embraced him tightly, breaking through several neighboring houses. It turned out that his mother, a woman known for her competence, was so emotional seeing her son return that she couldn't contain her feelings. Although she had a kind appearance, her excessive obsession with her only child had created a fatal weakness for him. Her embrace nearly made Al surrender his life, and before he could react, a man stepped out from behind the house with a tense expression. Thinking a stranger was openly flirting with his wife, he rushed in and delivered a direct punch to Al's face. At that moment, Al's mother immediately flew into a rage, screaming for a fight to the death with her husband for daring to hurt her son. Al's father, after recognizing that he was his biological son, quickly apologized profusely, promising to make it up to him if he survived his wife's anger. After the family brawl, Al was cared for by his mother like a toddler just learning to walk, while his father was forced to eat separately in the kitchen with charred grilled chicken, a symbol of the man's unjust suffering in this family. Although he had experienced many specialties during his journey, Al realized that nothing could replace the taste of his mother's cooking. She was extremely happy hearing her son's praise, then curiously asked if Rurushi was his future girlfriend. His father became even more excited, eagerly anticipating holding a grandchild as soon as possible. As soon as Al's mother heard about grandchildren, she went crazy, twisting her husband's neck right at the dinner table for daring to dream so prematurely. Watching his parents turn the reunion into an intense verbal battle, Al could only stay silent, trying to explain that Rurushi was just a traveling companion temporarily helping him when he came to this town. Al's mother's constantly changing expressions reminded him of Princess Fallwise, who had once troubled him with her equally unpredictable personality. That evening, after things calmed down, Al's father came to see his son privately, saying he was grateful that Rurushi had protected him throughout the journey. He also revealed that when Al left home to live independently, his mother was very stressed and found it difficult to accept. When asked about the reason for coming to Jugo, Al happily shared that he was looking for a type of salt water used as fertilizer for growing plants. Hearing this, his father immediately gave directions to a salt production factory at the edge of town. While looking over the map, Al accidentally revealed the location of the inn that Rurushi had marked, surprising his father, who had never known of any inn existing at that location. Incidentally, Al asked about rumors of demon tribes, but the man had not heard any similar rumors. Nevertheless, he seemed momentarily pensive when mentioning Al's mother, as if hiding something, then quickly urged his son to go to bed early so he could reach the salt factory the next day. Unexpectedly, while finding a place to sleep, Al decided to return to his own room but discovered his mother waiting inside. Immediately, his father rushed in to wake him up with a horrified look, worried that if she found him lying there, this family would lose its pillar in an instant. The next morning, Al was full of excitement because he had obtained exactly the type of salt he needed. On his way to find Rurushi to share the good news, he suddenly heard desperate screams echoing from afar. A man covered in wounds rushed over to report that the demon tribe had just attacked a nearby area, while revealing that a blue-haired girl was bravely fighting them, helping him escape. Upon hearing this, Al immediately asked for the location and rushed to help without any suspicion. However, what he didn't know was the suspicious expression of that man, who broke into a malicious smile after Al left, while the surrounding villagers gradually disappeared like illusions. On his way to find Rurushi, Al encountered a young girl being attacked by a bizarre creature. Without hesitation, he rushed in to help and quickly eliminated the monster. After the battle, the girl embraced him as if infinitely grateful. However, Al immediately sensed something unusual, and this suspicion was confirmed when Rurushi appeared just in time, knocking away the imposter, which was actually a monster beast specializing in disguising itself as a human. She explained that the forest where they were standing was extremely dangerous, a place where demons had the ability to transform to deceive emotions and vision. Rurushi had been continuously fighting here for many hours to eliminate each dangerous creature. Just as they were about to leave, the person who had claimed to be a merchant who had told Rurushi about the rumors emerged from the shadows, clapping and laughing mockingly. He expressed disappointment that the descendant of the legendary hero had fallen so easily into such a simple trap. He declared that Rurushi was nothing more than a failed warrior, unworthy of carrying the bloodline of the person who had once destroyed the legendary demon lord. As the atmosphere in the forest grew heavy with the unexpected appearance of a mysterious merchant, he suddenly revealed his true identity: Loki, a powerful demon who had been hiding all this time to conceal his deep conspiracy. Seeing him, Roroshifarhan thought she was the main target being pursued, as she carried within her the power of the Holy Angel, humanity's great hope. However, Loki wasn't targeting her but directed his hostility toward Alwyn, who had single-handedly defeated Aramiro, the former fearsome leader of the Demon King's army and the dark dragon that had once spread terror across the continent. Recognizing that Al could be dangerous and lead to all his plans being disrupted, Loki decided to attack proactively to eliminate the threat from the start. As tension rose, Roroshifarhan didn't hesitate to draw her sword and charge forward, trying to get close enough to attack the enemy. However, all her strikes were easily dodged by Loki, who then counterattacked, severely injuring her. The moment Al saw his companion in danger, he immediately applied healing skills to prevent the situation from worsening. Witnessing this action, Loki shifted his target to Al, determining that he was the main obstacle that needed to be eliminated first to prevent his plan from being interrupted. Although feeling guilty for becoming a burden, Roroshifarhan was still encouraged and protected by Al without hesitation. With absolute faith in his own abilities as an all-capable farmer possessing a series of extraordinary skills, Al showed no sign of faltering in the face of his opponent's overwhelming power. In the intense confrontation, Al threw a punch with extreme force, but it was caught completely by Loki, who then threw him backward, seemingly at a disadvantage. Al immediately used the momentum to propel himself back at high speed, counterattacking instantly. Faced with such persistence, Loki was forced to switch to using magic, launching a large-scale attack that cracked the ground, creating a deep hole that swallowed Al. However, he still resiliently emerged, using his muscle power to deliver a straight punch to Loki. Immediately after, Loki retaliated with dark magic, sending Al flying and causing the box he always carried to break open. Nevertheless, seeing Al able to resist to that extent with just his bare hands, Loki couldn't help but highly value him. However, Al's ability to self-heal did not intimidate his opponent. Rather, it further reinforced his confidence in the dominance of dark magic. Realizing that precious time was being extended, Al pretended to casually ask about the reason he was chosen as the main target, hoping to find an opportunity to adjust the battle situation. Although well aware of this intention, Loki still didn't spare words explaining because he considered himself idle, ready to chat before ending the fun. He revealed that he was systematically eliminating all individuals possessing the potential to obstruct the plan to rebuild the world under demon rule. That list included not only Rura Shifarhan, but also Helenlian, those carrying the evil dragon's energy. All were targets for assassination. Loki continuously provided deep analyses of the power relationship between the Holy Angel and the Evil Angel. When the Demon King was destroyed, the Evil Angel's power was also seriously diminished. However, on the hero's side, specifically Rurushi, she had not yet been able to fully unlock the power from the Holy Angel within her. This caused the balance to temporarily tilt toward darkness. After considering all warnings sufficiently conveyed, Loki ordered 2 parasitic creatures shaped like giant leeches to emerge from the ground to eliminate both Al and Rura Shifarhan. With lightning-fast reflexes, Al immediately dodged while rushing to save his teammate from being attacked. Rurushi, though covered in wounds, still tried to stand up, sacrificing herself to buy time for Al to retreat. However, he firmly refused, because if he turned his back and abandoned his teammate in battle, nothing would be worthy of the self-respect of a true man who had sworn to live as the greatest farmer. After that life or death oath, Al threw a punch that caused one of the mutant creatures to explode. Seeing that both still persistently resisted, Loki no longer maintained his joking demeanor, but released more dark power for a comprehensive attack. In that dangerous moment, Al shielded Rurushi's entire body, taking most of the explosion, ensuring she could continue fighting though both were severely injured. Not stopping there, Loki continued to order another leech to attack, flinging Rurushi away, while having the 2 remaining mutant creatures firmly attached to Al, immobilizing him on the ground. According to Loki, his initial purpose wasn't to finish Al, but to find joy in battling a rare opponent. However, once those creatures had drained his blood, he would hardly survive much longer. Witnessing Al in such a critical situation, Rurushi felt unending torment. She remembered her parents' words, those who never emphasized whether she would become a hero, or not, just that as long as their daughter remained steadfast in the path she chose, they would always support her no matter what. Recalling their trusting eyes, she realized that all this time she had too easily abandoned her dream just because of trivial slander. When she decided to be ready to accept death to atone, she suddenly discovered that the creatures attached to Al unexpectedly vanished. Loki was completely unable to recognize the cause of the mutant creature's destruction. Al, though in a seriously injured state, calmly revealed that what eliminated those creatures was simply the pure salt he always carried in his bag, originally intended as fertilizer for his fields. Unexpectedly, that seemingly simple mineral turned out to be the absolute nemesis against those blood-sucking leeches, a fatal blow that Loki couldn't anticipate. Although Al was exhausted, Loki still showed contempt, believing he no longer had the ability to resist. However, he still bravely charged forward, continuing to attack with all his strength to protect his loved ones, especially Rura Shifarhan and Helenlian. Witnessing Alwyn disregard his serious injuries and still devote all his strength to fighting to protect others, Rura Shifarhan seemed to awaken after a long period of living in doubt and self-consciousness. She began to realize that the reason she hadn't been able to unlock her power lay not in her physique or abilities, but in her belief in herself. All this time, she had always been held back by baseless gossip and judgments. Unkind assessments from outsiders had caused Rurushi to bury her dream of becoming a true hero early on, living quietly in doubt. But completely opposite to her, Al, just a farmer, even though he had fallen into a state of exhaustion and was so severely injured that he could barely stand, still didn't give up his will to defeat Loki and save people. Because of this, Rura Shifarhan finally understood that the most important thing wasn't lineage or power, but a heart unwavering in the face of difficulty that truly makes a hero. Ignoring the arrogant warning from Loki that Al should stop before becoming completely devastated, Rurushi seized the precious moment when the opponent was distracted to close in and thrust her sword straight into him. However, this action didn't catch Loki off guard, as he was still showing signs of weariness with rambling moral reasoning, feeling it was no different than a joke. But that overconfidence became a serious mistake. In that moment, a hidden power exploded from deep within Rurushi's body, the pure energy inherited from the Holy Angel since ancient times finally awakened. No longer a young woman who always doubted herself, Rura Shifarhan now carried the brilliant light of the Holy Angel, radiating an aura that Loki could no longer take lightly. Just one swing of her sword caused the fearsome demon to be gravely wounded. Not giving the opponent time to react, she launched a second slash carrying all the will and power that had been suppressed for so long, ending the battle with a fatal blow that completely erased Loki. When the battle was over, she joyfully ran to tell Al the news, only to find he had fainted and was lying still, his head resting on her lap as if completely unaware. Although the situation was somewhat unexpected, Ruroshifarhan didn't push him away, as her heart had somehow already fallen for this strange young man without her realizing when. Night fell in gentle silence, and Alwyn finally regained consciousness. Opening his eyes, the first thing he saw was Rurushi's flushed face, wondering why there was a special pillow under his head, a dream many would envy. As soon as they looked at each other, they bumped foreheads due to embarrassment, making the atmosphere even more awkward. Ruroshifarhan intended to carry Al on her back, but then realized she had no clear sense of direction in the strange forest, so she temporarily let him rest more. When morning came, Al led the way out of the dangerous place. As they walked, they suddenly heard a strange sound coming from a bush ahead. Rurushi immediately tensed, thinking Loki hadn't been completely eliminated. Although not afraid to confront zombies or monsters with shapes, she particularly couldn't stand invisible things that were hard to reach. The sound grew closer, making her heart beat rapidly. However, it turned out that what both feared was just the familiar voice of Al's mother frantically searching for her lost son. As soon as he recognized who was coming, Al immediately turned pale, knowing that if his mother saw Rurushi, the situation could be even more complicated than encountering monsters. With no other choice, he picked her up and ran desperately out of the forest, making Rurushi laugh because she thought Al was afraid of ghosts. But he affirmed there was something that scared him much more: his mother. After leaving the forest, they discovered that the inn where Rurushi had stayed no longer existed. She had to find new accommodation, while Al planned to return home. He asked Rurushi to temporarily become his bodyguard as previously agreed. On the way back, memories from years ago flooded in, making Al somewhat worried. In the past, just for secretly going out to play with Testa without informing his mother, he had been severely punished upon returning. When he first opened the door, the terrifying memory immediately replayed his mother rushing out as if from nowhere, making Al quickly shut the door reflexively. Unexpectedly, his mother was behind him from who knows when, causing Al to run fearfully straight into the house, inadvertently abandoning his father standing outside the door and turning him into a sacrifice to bear his wife's furious anger. The next morning, Al's mother wouldn't let her son leave the house, clinging tightly as if never letting go again. Although his father tried to persuade her, he didn't dare intervene deeply because he understood clearly who held the power in the family. With no choice left, Al blurted out a threat that if she continued to prevent him, he would become angry with her too. That statement made her soften, even apologize. Before parting, his mother asked if Al still wanted to continue living a farmer's life. Although she worried her son was trying too hard out of a sense of responsibility, Al affirmed that the decision to pursue farming wasn't because anyone forced him, but simply because it was what he truly loved. He desired to cultivate, nurture crops, and live peacefully in his own way. His mother told Al it wasn't necessary to always be too kind. Sometimes he should be a bit selfish to avoid living with regrets. Afterward, both parents saw him off to the meeting point with Ruri. When they met again, Ruri was extremely curious about why Loki had targeted Al, while fearing that demons might continuously target him from now on. Al didn't say much, just smiled and reminded Ruroshifarhan that if she encountered difficulties in the future, she should speak up, and he would definitely help. As soon as she heard this, Rurushi blushed with embarrassment, quickly avoiding the topic because that statement was exactly what she had originally intended to confess to Al first. While Alwyn left the capital to continue his journey, the peaceful royal city suddenly fell into chaos when a serious crisis unexpectedly erupted. Princess Fallwise Maegis, who was seen as a symbol of hope for the kingdom, had no choice but to sacrifice herself to protect the country from the disaster of extinction. This news soon reached Al's ears, just as he had brought Ruroshifarhan to meet his foster mother, Testa Helen. Upon meeting, Helen immediately carefully observed the relationship between the two, silently analyzing their attitudes and ways of speaking. Meanwhile, Rurushi had her own perception, believing that between her and Alwyn existed a deep emotion, no different than two comrades who had stood shoulder to shoulder at the boundary between life and death. Both Helen and Rurushi outwardly greeted each other cheerfully, making Al feel relieved. But in reality, both were silently refusing to back down in the hidden battle for a special position beside the talented farmer. The next morning, an unexpected incident occurred when Al discovered a boy sneaking into his vegetable garden stealing eggplants. Ironically, at that moment Helen and Rurushi arrived to help him harvest. The scene caused both to accidentally witness Al's stern demeanor as he loudly lectured the boy for daring to touch fruits that weren't ripe enough. Although the child repeatedly apologized and expressed regret, Al still clearly showed his disappointment because that eggplant crop was a rare variety being tested, which couldn't be replaced. At first, Al planned to punish the child symbolically, even pretending to say he would take 2 of the boy's eggplants to recover his investment. However, realizing the boy did this because he had been hungry for too long, Alwyn softened his tone and gave him a raw white radish to satisfy his hunger. This action moved the boy to tears before he ran away in indescribable joy. As for Al, he unconsciously remembered how difficult his own life had been before, when each potato and each ear of corn was an entire asset. After the incident, Helen explained that due to monster attacks raging near the border, essential food transportation routes had been completely cut off. This caused prices to soar, seriously affecting poor families. While the conversation wasn't over, urgent news arrived from outside the capital. Monsters in countless numbers were launching an attack. Adventurers stationed nearby immediately engaged in battle to stop the invasion. However, due to the overwhelming disparity in forces, the human side gradually found itself at a disadvantage. In this critical moment, Helen, who carried dragon blood, suddenly activated her hidden power, transforming into a dragon right on the battlefield. With fire magic skills learned from the ancient evil dragon, she stood alone at the front line, launching fire pillars that burned an entire formation of monsters, earning the great admiration of those around her. A giant snake-shaped monster suddenly lunged up from beneath the ground, intending to ambush Helen from behind. In this situation, Rurashafarhan intervened before the enemy could get close. Not stopping there, Alwyn also quickly appeared, using his familiar rake as a weapon, sweeping across the monster formation in front of him. Each swing of his arms carried strength far beyond imagination, throwing dozens of nightmare creatures off the ground. However, the number of enemies kept increasing without stopping, making the battle situation increasingly unfavorable. In the moment when everything hung by a thread, a unit of soldiers raising a high red flag entered, led by a majestic black armored knight. That person drew a sword gleaming with light and declared to all in the name of the monarch of the Antibale Empire that anyone who dared to invade would be incinerated by the holy sword. Strangely, after this warning, all the monsters suddenly stopped, then immediately retreated from the battlefield, helping the human side achieve a spectacular victory. As night fell, Al sat quietly cleaning his wooden rake. Unexpectedly, Princess Fallwise Magus appeared at his house. Although she had lost her royal status after the upheavals, her eyes still maintained the same determination as before. She sat down, saying goodbye to Al, revealing that she would leave this land forever. He tried to ask the reason, hoping to learn more about her decision. But before he could finish speaking, the princess's personal servant came to urge her. Fal only had time to look back, her eyes containing an indescribable sadness, then quickly stepped onto the horse carriage and disappeared into the darkness. Al stood silent for a long time, not understanding why she left without a complete explanation. From that moment, Fallwise Magus vanished without a trace, no one seeing her appear anywhere. Time passed, and thanks to the majestic power of the Holy Sword from Antibale and the timely intervention, the monsters did not reappear. Commercial routes were quickly restored. One day, the child who had sneaked into the garden to steal, along with his mother, came to Al's house to apologize. The woman couldn't stop thanking him for his righteous action the other day. The child innocently praised the cabbage in Al's garden as delicious. Learning that the mother worked at a nearby tailor's shop, Al smiled and nodded. She suggested that if Al needed anything, he could come to her. Incidentally, she also expressed interest in buying vegetables, so Al introduced the fragrant potatoes that were in harvest season before bidding them goodbye. Unexpectedly, a familiar postman appeared from somewhere, startling Al. He came to deliver mail and didn't forget to compliment Al's agricultural products, saying they were very popular with the people. Alwyn showed humility, attributing the credit to the holy sword that had protected the country, helping crops avoid destruction. However, Lick just looked at him without affirming anything more, silently taking out an early morning announcement to give to Al, opening up new events silently approaching. In the Great Hall of the Adventurers Guild, Testa Helen with her usual enthusiasm invited Rorashafarhan to join her for lunch. When the two had just sat down at the table, Helen pulled out the announcement distributed early that morning, which clearly stated information that surprised everyone. Princess Fallwise Magus was preparing to marry the prince of the Antibale Empire. This prince had appeared with the holy sword in the battle at the royal capital, helping to repel the monster horde. Helen hoped this wasn't a political marriage arranged under the name of peace. Meanwhile, Rurushi showed doubt, because clearly monster herds had never had the ability to understand human speech. Yet at that time they showed complete submission to that person's presence. Just as the conversation was taking place, Alwyn came to the guild, asking Helen if she had seen Fallwise Magus in recent days. Helen mentioned that the princess had been absent from the guild for 10 consecutive days, which made Al even more certain that the announcement's content was completely true. After a few moments of consideration, Al decided to show Helen and Rurushi the letter his mother had sent him. Although the beginning of the letter contained affectionate inquiries from a mother to her son who was far from home, Al skipped that part, only reading them the core of the issue. In the letter, his mother, who had lived in seclusion with a farmer's identity, said she was extremely angry when monsters appeared continuously, causing the goods line to stagnate, seriously affecting Alwyn's life. During her investigation, she discovered that the holy sword used by the Antibale prince wasn't authentic. The person who forged that sword wasn't even a magician or royal blacksmith, but just an ordinary craftsman. The next part truly astonished the two girls. It turned out that Alwyn's mother had once held the position of team leader of a renowned intelligence unit called Cage Mingyaoden, the Shadow Puppet Society. This organization was rumored to have the ability to collect information from everywhere in the world, including seemingly invisible data like web browsing history. As for Al, he had no idea what this society meant, only thinking the name sounded a bit strange. However, the content of the final paragraph of the letter was truly most important. According to his mother, the monster attack at the capital was related to a demon. However, this demon had no malicious intent. He was forced to summon monsters because the person he loved was being held captive. This proved that the entire event was a drama staged to put pressure on Princess Fal, forcing her to accept the wedding for the political interests of the empire. When Alwyn heard this, he could no longer contain the boiling anger in his heart. He wanted to immediately set out to rescue Fall-Wise Magus, but almost accidentally revealed her true identity. Rurushi Farhan, who had overcome many dangers with the princess, also couldn't stand by and watch her friend being forced. However, Helen carefully reminded them that infiltrating Antibale territory was not easy. Al smiled confidently and affirmed they already had an excellent guide, Lick, the friendly postman they often met. On the other side, at the center of power in the Antibale Empire, Prince Netulus was enjoying praise from neighboring countries, claiming to have used the holy sword to repel the monster horde. He proclaimed himself a representative of peace, thereby forcing weaker countries to pay tribute resources for protection. After concluding the meeting, Netulus smiled smugly, believing all those leaders were being led by the nose. Afterward, he ordered the demon Gaz to continue expanding the scale of monster summoning. Although Gaz expressed opposition because he didn't want his people to be sacrificed needlessly, Netulus ignored all opinions, as he was holding Gaz's human girlfriend as a hostage. At that moment, Princess Fall-Wise Magus unexpectedly entered the room. Though not grasping the entire plan in the shadows, her intuition told her that what was happening was completely wrong. Netulus still tried to maintain a pleasant demeanor, speaking sweet words inviting her to enjoy fine wine with him. But Fal refused. He pretended to ask if she had any dissatisfaction living there, inwardly confident that she would eventually become accustomed to the role of Empress, and tomorrow's wedding ceremony would proceed according to plan. Meanwhile, Alwyn went to the tailor shop of the boy's mother, who had previously stolen vegetables. Here, he asked her to urgently make several outfits for an important trip. At the same time, Lick had also received a secret letter sent by an insider at Antibale. The contents confirmed that all preparations for the wedding ceremony had been completed. Al immediately ran to meet Lick, who then suggested the group use a special horse carriage to infiltrate the city. All luggage had been disguised in advance, ensuring they could easily pass through checkpoints without arousing suspicion. As for Lick himself, he would perform an equally important mission, summoning neutral monsters to expose Netulus's true face before the entire kingdom. The goal was to prove that the holy sword he was holding was just a fake, causing the wedding ceremony to be suspended. When Helen asked how he could gather the monster herd, Lick decided to reveal his true identity. It turned out he belonged to one of the few disguised demons living harmoniously among humans. Not only that, many other demons were silently doing the same. Gaz, who had summoned the monsters, loved a human girl, but because Netulus exploited this to threaten him, he was forced to obey the cruel orders. Mentioning the demons being dragged into an unwanted war, Lick couldn't hide his pain. Alwyn reassured him that everything would be resolved satisfactorily, advising him to entrust that important part to him. Meanwhile, Princess Fall-Wise Magus sat alone in her room, silently thinking about the uncertain future. Although tomorrow was the wedding day, her heart was directed toward only one person, Alwyn. She whispered that small wish to herself with regret, not knowing that outside the door, Netulus had been standing listening to all those silent whispers. Across all territories on the continent, people flocked to the streets, eagerly awaiting the wedding day considered proof of a new era of peace, the ceremony uniting Prince Netulus of the Antibale Empire and Princess Fall-Wise Magus of the Magus Kingdom. In the eyes of the subjects, this was not just a momentous event binding two nations together, but also recognition of Netelus's great contribution, the man who once wielded the holy sword to repel the monster forces. Inside the palace, Netellus stood silently observing Falwise in her pure white ceremonial attire, as magnificent as a flower amid the snow season. His eyes were full of self-satisfaction, because not only did he hold the support of neighboring countries, but he was also gradually approaching his dream of gaining complete control over the continent through his ability to control demons with that divine weapon. Meanwhile, Falwise maintained a cold expression, revealing no emotion. Although knowing he wouldn't receive any agreement from her, Netellus still temporarily withdrew, leaving the princess alone in the room. Standing silently before the mirror, Falwise looked at her own reflection, her heart heavy. In her memory, her father's loving advice from years ago echoed again, teachings about living for herself, marrying someone she truly loved, regardless of high or low status. However, carrying the burden of a princess on her shoulders, she had to put aside personal feelings to fulfill her noble duty to the nation. No matter how strong her reason was, her heart still trembled before the fate that had been arranged. At the same time, Olwain's group was in a carefully disguised horse carriage, having successfully infiltrated Antibale City in secret. To avoid drawing attention, all three chose to disguise themselves as ordinary people. Olwain was extremely confident in the outfit he was currently wearing, traditional farming attire. However, Rurashifarhen and Testahelen couldn't help but feel exasperated because that outfit was completely inappropriate in the context of the luxurious palace, even drawing more attention than expected. They wanted to rescue the human girl being held captive Gaz's lover, then lead her to the ceremony venue to expose Netellus's conspiracy through her actual testimony. Al appeared very certain about the plan. However, as soon as they peeked out from around the corner, a squad of guards quickly approached to question them. With a determined look, Al boldly introduced himself as a farmer delivering vegetables. Not only that, he candidly declared that these vegetables would be delivered directly to the central palace. The answer, truthful to the point of absurdity, caused all the guards to immediately give chase. While running for their lives, Rurashifarhen couldn't understand why the group's whereabouts had been exposed. Given the situation, Helen decided to use her dragon transformation power to throw Olwain into the castle. Fortunately, he landed directly in the room where the human girl was being held, a person restrained by heavy iron chains connected to a weight. When guards suddenly burst in, Al immediately used the four-sword style technique, launching 4 white radishes from his sleeve. In an instant, all the guards were defeated by the method of stuffing vegetables into their mouths so they couldn't call for help. He quickly explained the situation to the girl, confirming that Gaz was being exploited by this very nation. Although her feet were still bound by chains, Al decided to carry both her and the weight, escaping the encirclement without hesitation. Meanwhile, Helen and Rurashifarhen continued to be pursued by palace soldiers. In the midst of danger, all three reunited at an intersection. Without time to catch their breath, the group split up to avoid being captured. The bell rang from the cathedral, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Helen and Rurushi decided to hold off the soldiers here so Al could proceed directly to the wedding venue. Before leaving, Olwain didn't forget to compliment his two friends on how well they looked in farmer outfits, then turned and ran like the wind, leaving the two brave women to contend with dozens of enemy soldiers. Lick, who was monitoring the entire situation from outside, knew that the moment for him to act had arrived. In the large, elaborately decorated main hall, the king stood before his daughter, hesitantly advising her to reconsider. However, Falwise, with a determined look, had resolutely chosen to sacrifice herself to exchange for peace for her people. At that time, Rurashifarhen and Helen were at a disadvantage, forced to make a strategic retreat to preserve their strength. In the cathedral, the priest began to perform the sacred ceremony, reciting blessing words for the soon-to-be-formed marriage bond. Netellus and Falwise moved closer to each other, preparing to exchange the kiss that would establish their marital relationship. Just as his lips were about to touch the princess, the great doors of the hall suddenly burst open violently, hitting Netellus directly in the face. Olwain, in farmer's attire, walked in, raising his hand to greet Falwise, causing her tears to fall uncontrollably. Netellus immediately interrupted, falsely accusing Al of being a traitor coming to kidnap the princess during the ceremony. However, Al didn't falter at all, immediately exposing the shocking truth: the sword that Netellus had always boasted about had no divine power at all. He was merely holding a fake prop manufactured to deceive the world. All the guests were stunned. Netellus laughed arrogantly, claiming that Al was just speaking nonsense because he had no concrete evidence. Even the king had been enchanted by the imposing image of the sword, having witnessed demons dissolving when it appeared. With the mindset of someone holding the initiative, Netellus took another step forward, challenging Olwain if he claimed it wasn't real. Then did he have anything to prove his words were correct? At that tense moment in the cathedral, when the atmosphere seemed to freeze before Alwyn's accusation that the Holy Sword was just a deceptive prop, a group of panicked soldiers rushed in to announce that a horde of monsters was invading the center of Antibale's capital. The situation became chaotic beyond imagination. It turned out that Lix had silently used a summoning whistle to invite all his monster friends to attend the wedding, causing the entire area around the church to be surrounded by mutant creatures. Under pressure from subjects and court officials, everyone implored Prince Netalus to quickly use the Holy Sword to suppress the monsters. Netalus's face briefly changed color as he understood the true capability of the weapon in his hand. Despite his fear, he still ordered Gazel to bring the sword for a demonstration of power. However, Gazel, after reuniting with his once captive lover, had changed his attitude, no longer submissive as before. Lix, understanding the plan, proactively brought the sword to Netalus, knowing well this would be the final exposure. Netalus reluctantly took it, desperately acting out a display of majesty. Alwyn didn't let it rest, throwing the sword toward a large roaring monster. Contrary to expectations, that creature showed no fear and even chomped down on that fake sword like a snack, crunching it crispy then spitting out the fragments mockingly. Seeing this, Gazel immediately used wind magic to sweep all the monsters out of the ceremony area, while standing up to expose Netalus's entire conspiracy before the whole court. He didn't hesitate to compare Netalus's methods to those of a ridiculous show-off, only using demons as a stepping stone to build a false image. The revealed truth shocked the entire church. The king was stunned to discover that Netalus had actually secretly sent a monster army to attack Magus beforehand, by arranging dead monster corpses along the movement route to conceal the true scale of the invasion conspiracy. The final intention was to use that chaos to annex Magus into Antibale territory after creating a pretext of humanitarian protection. As the king hurriedly ordered his guards to immediately send people to support Magus, Netalus loudly asserted that reinforcements couldn't arrive in time. But right after, Julia and Testahelen stepped forward from behind, offering a rebuttal. Both revealed that after the previous attack, the adventurers' guilds had helped train Magus soldiers, building strong defenses. Thanks to this, the combined army and the people of Magus were now resisting fiercely to protect their homeland. Hearing these words, the king was moved to tears, never expecting his subordinates to be so courageous. Alwyn then approached foul-wise Magus, affirming that she no longer needed to sacrifice herself for politics. Netalus tried to counterattack one last time by ordering soldiers to capture the entire group of troublemakers. However, Digerishafarhan and Testahelen quickly spoke up to expose all the dark actions, awakening the soldiers who unanimously refused to obey Netalus anymore. Enraged, he swung his sword and lunged forward intending to assassinate the king. But a radish throw from Alwyn timely blocked the sword's path. Al stepped forward, delivering a heaven-sent punch, considering it a declaration ending that fake dynasty. Netalus was immediately escorted away by soldiers to face punishment. The entire court sighed with relief. In the burst of joy, foul-wise Magus couldn't contain her emotions, running to embrace Alwyn and acknowledging her feelings for the person who had disregarded all dangers to protect her. Digerishafarhan nearby became furious, believing that foul-wise was using her princess status to claim the position beside Al. Alwyn awkwardly suggested that foul-wise calm down, but she absolutely refused to let go. Al turned to the king to explain the situation. However, not only did the king not object, but he also smiled and accepted Alwyn as a future son-in-law, then quietly left, leaving the young man with a heap of trouble. Lix now approached, handing the king a secret letter, one that had been sent to Netalus by a masked person. Inside contained the entire attack plan, political overthrow, and demon control. Noticing the strange handwriting, the king suspected that behind everything could be the Dark Puppet Society organization, a dangerous underground force. However, Lix's side still hadn't investigated the true identity of the mastermind. A few days later, Netalus was escorted to the central prison of Magus, while peace gradually returned throughout the land. The guild master congratulated Alwyn for successfully rescuing the princess, causing the organization's reputation to soar. A series of new mission requests flooded in, keeping him extremely busy. Amid this, foul-wise Magus unexpectedly came to the headquarters in person, bringing a chest of precious treasures as a token of gratitude. When foul-wise entered, Helen suddenly felt that the princess looked very familiar, but couldn't remember from where. In response, Alwyn choked on his beer due to tension. Not stopping there, foul-wise afterward surprisingly disguised herself as an ordinary person, returned to the guild with an extremely serious demeanor, and officially declared war against Julia for the position of #1 woman in Alwyn's heart. Julia didn't falter at all, boldly declaring that whether princess or commoner, she would still confront her to the end. the two women decided they must determine a winner to secure a place beside the farmer-turned-hero. Alwyn, afraid of being caught in the crossfire, quickly slipped away to the fields, continuing to research the new tomato variety he had just fertilized with special nutrients, making the fruits extremely plump. Nevertheless, both Digerishafarhin and Falwise Magus didn't give up. They successively pressured Al to choose who he truly loved. Al awkwardly changed the direction of the conversation, not answering directly, causing them to question more resolutely, recalling the times he had sacrificed for them. When cornered, Alwyn surprisingly revealed that he actually had another girl in his heart. Then, without letting anyone react, he quietly brought a basket of vegetables to a small house at the edge of the village, giving them to a mysterious girl in a photo once taken with him, gently calling her name Elvia. About 15 years ago, in a peaceful village nestled in the middle of a prosperous countryside, a man affectionately called Super Dad was diligently harvesting potatoes in the early sunlight. While he was focusing on pulling up the tubers, he suddenly discovered his son Alwyn carrying a basket of potatoes 1.5 times his size, leaving him speechless with surprise. However, before he could open his mouth to praise him, Alwyn's mother unexpectedly appeared from inside the house, her face red with anger, misunderstanding that her husband had forced their beloved son to work too hard. Meanwhile, young Alwyn was already walking to distribute the freshly harvested potatoes to the neighboring houses, showing his kind nature and desire to help others from a young age. When returning from his potato delivery, Alwyn accidentally saw a little girl being caught by villagers for stealing vegetables. Although she didn't explain her circumstances, her cloudy eyes and tattered clothes made everyone guess that perhaps this girl had no family, or had been abandoned, forced to wander in the mountains near the village. A kind elderly neighbor could only sigh helplessly, pitying her because in such a situation, the girl could easily fall into the hands of slave traders. In her fear, the small girl suddenly bit the hand of the person holding her and used the opportunity to escape, conveniently grabbing the basket of potatoes that Alwyn had left nearby. Despite losing the potatoes he had just harvested, he wasn't angry but rather more concerned. After following her tracks, Alwyn found the forest at the edge of the village where the little girl was hiding, bringing a hot bowl of potato soup, hoping to ease her hunger. However, the girl's suspicion was still too great. Faced with her cautious gaze, he had to place the soup down and quietly withdraw. The next day, Alwyn returned, bringing some root vegetable cakes. This time, the girl didn't run away, but still kept a certain distance. Day after day, his persistence and sincerity finally began to remove the defensive layers around her. One morning, as the two sat under a large tree sharing a tomato-filled pastry grown by Alwyn himself, the little girl slowly uttered the name she had kept secret for so long, Elvia. It was the first time Alwyn learned her name. To reciprocate his kindness, Elvia gave her portion of the pastry to the boy, because when she heard his stomach growling, she knew that a hungry person couldn't be happy. Right in that warm moment, two farmers from the village, those who had been robbed by Elvia, suddenly appeared and quickly captured the little girl. Unable to do anything else, Alwyn bowed his head and pleaded for them to forgive Elvia, committing to take full responsibility and compensate for the damages. When the situation was extremely tense, his super dad appeared, asking detailed questions about everything. After understanding the root cause, he silently removed the large bag of rice he was carrying on his shoulder, which was the food reserved for the entire family, and gave it to them in exchange for Elvia's freedom. Alwyn was truly frightened, because if his mother found out about this, Super Dad would likely be banished to sleep in the chicken coop for at least a week. Nevertheless, he maintained a strangely calm demeanor. Moved by this gesture, Elvia decided to return the basket of potatoes she had stolen from Alwyn, giving them back fully to his family as a way to express her remorse. With a quick wink, Super Dad directed his gaze toward his son, clearly implying that the family would soon have another person to help with cooking. Understanding immediately, Alwyn smiled and invited Elvia to come live with him. From that day, the small house in the peaceful countryside had one more member. 2 years passed as quickly as a dream, and Elvia was officially adopted, becoming Alwyn's legal sister. Alwyn was still the boy who loved farming more than anything else. Nevertheless, he always told Elvia that she didn't always need to help him in the fields, but should spend time playing and making friends with children in the village. One afternoon, he unexpectedly met Tessia, the always energetic friend, running while shouting and being chased by a giant swarm of bees. Alwyn's mother, seeing this scene from afar, immediately flew over, delivering a lightning-fast kick that dispersed the bee swarm, allowing Tessia to escape danger. This friend immediately praised Al's mother, making Super Dad jealous, who rushed over to scold him for daring to flirt with his wife. His mother just smiled, casually saying that the only person she loved was still Super Dad, then nonchalantly left him outside the chicken coop. Before leaving the village to go to the kingdom capital for business, his mother instructed the two siblings to take care of the house carefully. Their family now had 4 people, so she wanted to find a more spacious place to live. Alwyn saw his parents off and then turned to ask Tessia why he had caused trouble with the bee swarm. That friend excitedly revealed that he had just found an ancient map leading to a treasure hidden deep in the forest near the village. Although the route seemed full of dangers, if they could avoid the killer bees, perhaps they would find a precious gem enough to change their lives forever. Knowing Olwain had special feelings for Elvia, Tessia intentionally suggested that if he obtained that gem, he could give it to Elvia as the most meaningful gift. With just that hint, Olwain's eyes lit up, ready to accompany Tessia into the mysterious forest with the hope of not only finding treasure, but also keeping a silent promise to the girl who had been by his side since childhood, Elvia. Elvia earnestly asked permission to follow Olwain on this adventure, but he, who already knew well the hidden dangers in the dark, deep forest, had to gently tell his sister to stay behind, ensuring safety in the home that their family had been attached to for many years. When the two left the village, Olwain turned to ask Tessia why Elvia always stayed by his side and never played or made friends with other children in the village like girls her age. Tessia then slowly related that each time Olwain was absent, the villagers' attitude toward Elvia often became unpleasant and cold, as if her existence was not welcomed. At that moment, Olwain suddenly realized something he had never understood before. His parents wanted to move houses not just because of living space or work, but mainly because they wished to find a friendlier environment for Elvia where she could grow up without having to endure discriminatory looks or avoidance. This truth made his heart tighten, full of remorse for being so thoughtless. Nevertheless, Tessia still tried to bring Olwain's spirits back by urging him to quickly proceed deeper into the forest, completing the goal of finding the treasure to return early. The journey following the map led both to a large rock crevice, which suddenly collapsed beneath their feet, causing them to fall into a deep cavity hidden underground. From there, an ancient scene appeared: an old, moss-covered castle silently lying in the heart of the dark cave. On the dust-covered stone wall, Tessia discovered a stone slab engraved with strange characters he had never seen before. When Olwain approached and touched it, the entire stone slab suddenly illuminated brilliantly. In that moment, a beam of light enveloped his mind, pulling his soul deep into the subconscious. There, a gigantic monster appeared, with blood-red eyes as if wanting to devour everything, watching him attentively as if waiting for something, then suddenly merged, entering his body without leaving a trace. Meanwhile, outside, the volcano near their village unexpectedly erupted violently, creating thick ash clouds covering the entire area. Olwain woke up in a state of exhaustion, his body covered with wounds, opening his eyes to see Elvia sitting beside him, her face full of worry. Tessia rushed over, explaining that after the volcano erupted, all the villagers had to evacuate urgently because ash covered everything white from rooftops to the vast fields. The most terrifying news was that the only bridge connecting the village to the outside had been completely destroyed, cutting off the supply route. Not long after, Tessia fortunately found news about Olwain's parents and had to leave the area early. Meanwhile, Olwain and Elvia witnessed villagers having to share pitifully small rations, as the amount of food remaining after the disaster was barely enough to survive each day. The once fertile land of his family had been completely burned by hot ash, now only bare with cold gray dust, and Olwain himself was severely injured, unable to do anything but lie motionless. Elvia, from the bottom of her heart, only hoped that he wouldn't suddenly disappear like what she had witnessed in the mountains years ago. That night, Elvia sneaked to where the village chief kept the food reserves. In her hand was an empty bag, a manifestation of her determination to steal some food for her brother, who was growing weaker each day. However, when standing at the door, she remembered the moment Olwain had knelt begging for forgiveness for her back then, along with the warm saying that vegetables are the happiness of farmers. This made Elvia unable to do something against her conscience, so she quietly returned. In the following days, Elvia decided to fast, giving her entire meager ration to her brother. Olwain noticed the food portion was somewhat more than usual, and when he asked, Elvia just gently said that relief supplies from the kingdom capital had timely reached them and brought more food. She even smiled cheerfully, encouraging her brother to eat a lot to recover quickly, because she was really looking forward to the day when she could taste the delicious vegetables grown by Olwain's own hands. In the following days, Elvia continued to endure terrible hunger in silence. Each time she saw her brother getting a little healthier, she forced a smile, hiding the fatigue that was gnawing at her small body. Until her physical strength was completely depleted, Elvia couldn't hold on any longer. Just as Olwain was temporarily recovering, Tessia came, bringing terrible news that made the world within him collapse. Elvia had breathed her last breath due to exhaustion from malnutrition. There was no relief supply from the capital, as the little girl had said. It was all a gentle, innocent lie, created only so he wouldn't worry. When his parents returned, everything was too late. This great loss plunged Alwyn into the depths of regret, blaming himself for not recognizing that silent sacrifice earlier. From that moment, in Alwyn's heart remained only one vow. No matter what hardships, he would never abandon farming. Because Elvia, his little sister, who had always looked forward to eating vegetables grown by his own hands, had left that simple dream as a flame burning quietly in his heart throughout his entire life. On a day like any other, Alwyn was carrying out his regular duties when he unexpectedly encountered a raging dragon on his way back. After fighting and accidentally landing a heaven-sent punch on it, he continued moving only to suddenly discover a girl lying unconscious by the roadside. Unable to abandon someone in such a critical condition, Alwyn brought her home to care for her. The next morning, the girl woke up with a suspicious expression, even thinking she had fallen into the hands of someone who might do inappropriate things to her. He immediately explained everything, but the more he spoke, the more she looked at him with scrutinizing eyes, not completely trusting him. After sensing genuine kindness from Alwyn, the girl finally opened up a little and said she was on her way to the Adventurers Guild in the capital to seek help with an investigation. Hearing this, Alwyn quickly offered to accompany her as he was planning to visit the guild soon. Introducing himself sincerely, he also asked about his traveling companion's identity. The girl replied that her name was Lucria. Before they could get acquainted for long, Juzi unexpectedly appeared at Alwyn's house. When she entered, she saw Lucria wearing Al's clothes while profusely apologizing for accidentally soiling the bed. A misunderstanding quickly erupted, causing Juzi to burst into tears and run away, believing things weren't as simple as they appeared. Helen, Alwyn's close friend, after fully understanding the situation, promised to clearly explain everything to Juzi, then turned to listen to Lucria explain her purpose for coming to the guild. Lucria revealed that the place where she lived, a town, was experiencing strange phenomena, with everything gradually becoming abnormally chaotic. Despite trying to explain, her words remained vague and lacked specific evidence, making Helen doubt whether anyone would be willing to accept this request. Lucria then asked if Alwyn was a powerful adventurer, but he just smiled, saying he was a genuine farmer. However, if she didn't mind being helped by a farmer, he was ready to take on this mission. Alwyn truly couldn't ignore a girl who had tried so hard that she fainted on the road because of this issue. Helen agreed with that decision, asking further about the name of the town where Lucria lived. When he heard the name Gaulies, Alwyn immediately changed expression because that place was famous for its renowned asparagus, an agricultural product that made his heart flutter. As someone obsessed with agriculture to the point of fixation, Alwyn lost his composure when mentioning Gaulies, a place that had made many people say that eating asparagus required true seriousness with one's mouth. Helen noticed his somewhat strange reaction, but Lucria confirmed those words weren't wrong at all, causing Alwyn to be so emotionally moved that he gripped her hand tightly, as if meeting a kindred spirit after years of searching. Helen could only stand aside, reassuring Lucria, accepting that although Alwyn was sometimes a bit different, he was very kind-hearted. Afterward, Alwyn bought Lucria a new set of clothes for the journey. Contrary to his good intentions, the girl suspected he had dubious motives, even thinking Alwyn was a lone wolf type who liked targeting young girls. This was because her father had always taught that no man helps women unconditionally. Alwyn had to explain until his voice was hoarse, affirming that he was very honest. But the more he spoke, the more deeply suspicious Lucria looked at him. To dispel her concerns, she declared she would only travel with someone she could trust absolutely, while closely following and monitoring him throughout the journey. Just as their hands accidentally touched for a moment, Juzi appeared again, encountering another easily misunderstood situation. She immediately thought that Helen had also deceived her, and that Lucria was having a special relationship with Alwyn. Without time to explain further, Alwyn and Lucria continued their journey to Gaulies by horse carriage. Just as he had dozed off a little, he suddenly felt something wasn't right. That premonition soon became reality when a group of imposing women rushed over. The driver said that just one of them was troublesome enough, but the whole group was a real disaster. Extremely frightened, Alwyn fainted on the spot. When he regained consciousness, he found himself resting his head on Lucria's lap and quickly apologized. Lucria immediately reacted harshly, thinking Alwyn had inappropriate thoughts. Nevertheless, she still gently gave him a necklace similar to the one she was wearing, which had the effect of stabilizing the spirit and preventing evil interference. After many hours of overcoming dangers, the two finally set foot in Gaulies. The town gate guards recognized Lucria, so they immediately allowed them to enter. Alwyn couldn't help but wonder when he saw the guards using mops instead of weapons, making him clearly sense the instability pervading the area. While walking through the market, Alwyn accidentally saw an area selling skewered meat with asparagus, his favorite dish. The chef at the stall said that this place was still peaceful, and the halt in trade was due to the Lord's decision, but it didn't affect much. After finishing his words, he handed Alwyn a skewer of meat so burned it was difficult to swallow. The seller's face looked like someone who had overdosed on drugs, making Alwyn feel something was abnormal. Another resident spilled vegetables on the road without any intention of picking them up, even stepping on them without caring. Alwyn tried to call that person back, but noticed the empty eyes and dazed expression no different from the chef. Suddenly from behind, two masked figures appeared, mistaking Alwyn for a package to be delivered, and immediately carried him away. Lucrea quickly brought Alwyn to her home, which turned out to be a shop specializing in selling necklaces with the ability to calm the spirit and repel spiritual toxins. Perhaps because of this, she and Alwyn had not yet lost their minds like most residents in the town. He immediately asked for a few more necklaces, incidentally inquiring about Lucrea's family. She sighed, stating that she had lost contact with her parents since the strange things started happening in Gaulies, so she had to rely on Alwyn to investigate. However, almost all the residents were in a dazed state, having lost the ability to communicate normally, making the investigation almost impossible. Alwyn realized that this time it wasn't simply just a farm mission anymore, but a real threat beginning, related to the lives of an entire town and hiding deep secrets that even Lucrea couldn't reach. While continuing the investigation journey about the mysterious town of Gaulies, Alwyn unexpectedly encountered a character with an unusual aura. That person introduced himself as Jima the Lord, causing him to immediately freeze because this man had once created a resounding asparagus farming revolution in this land, something that had ignited admiration in the heart of a farmer like Alwyn. Jima was curious about the necklace that Alwyn was wearing because it had a shape quite similar to an object he possessed. Noticing that the Lord still retained his clarity amid a town falling into chaos, Alwyn developed the idea to learn more from him. Jima invited Alwyn to dinner at his mansion. He agreed, seeing this as an opportunity to access more necessary information. However, just before arriving at the mansion, two strange merchants appeared again, mistaking Alwyn for a special package and escorted him away, causing him to temporarily leave Lucrea. When alone, she began to reveal her true thoughts, believing that Jima's calm living in the center of the town while everyone around was out of control was extremely abnormal. According to her, a person who truly cared for the people wouldn't be able to sit still like that without finding ways to report or call for support from elsewhere. Nevertheless, Alwyn still maintained faith that just by talking directly, everything would become clear. Lucrea shook her head slightly, thinking he was too trusting and sooner or later that kindness would be exploited. But Alwyn believed he had enough ability to handle any situation, no matter how surprising. When they approached the Lord's mansion, Alwyn noticed that the entire hallway was decorated with paintings of asparagus, a sign showing that Jima was indeed someone who put his heart and soul into this plant. During the meal, he didn't beat around the bush, but directly asked about the strange condition engulfing the town. Contrary to expectations, Jima just calmly said there was no need to worry about such things, then ordered his soldiers to draw their weapons, ready to subdue Alwyn. Of course, he wasn't the type to easily submit. In an instant, Alwyn counterattacked, taking down all the soldiers in the room without much effort. Just as he was about to rush forward to confront Jima, Lucrea unexpectedly stopped him, stunning Alwyn. The truth crashed down when Lucrea confessed that she was on the same side as Jima, who in reality was now just a puppet for another force. It turned out that the Lord's body had been possessed by a noble demon named Viega Char. This being possessed the ability to steal others' consciousness to use as a shell, while increasing his own power. He created a gem containing all his power and buried it right under the large statue in the town center, using magical waves from there to manipulate the residents' minds. Viega Char's current plan was to expand the control range to the entire royal capital. He had heard that Alwyn had once defeated Romeo, a high-ranking figure in the adventuring world, and even defeated the evil dragon. Therefore, he wanted to use Alwyn's body as a perfect vessel for the control gem. When Alwyn questioned whether everything that had happened from meeting Lucrea to her fainting by the roadside was a scripted scenario, Lucrea admitted that the first encounter was coincidental, but afterwards she was forced to cooperate because her parents were being held hostage by Viega Char. Despite knowing he was betrayed, Alwyn didn't blame her, but only gently asked her to maintain what faith she had left. In the moment Viega Char was about to activate the gem to enter Alwyn's body, Lucrea couldn't continue to turn a blind eye. She implored Alwyn to quickly escape, not wanting this sincere young man to be destroyed because of her weakness. Alwyn just smiled, taking out a glowing stone and throwing it forcefully toward the mansion's ceiling where a loud breaking sound had just occurred. The central statue in the square had been knocked down. The controlled troops immediately collapsed due to losing their control source. He revealed that the person who destroyed that statue was his friend. Viegachar was even more stunned because all this time, he had assigned Lucria the task of monitoring Alwyn 24 hours a day. However, the only 2 times he disappeared from sight were exactly when he was kidnapped by 2 mysterious merchants. It turned out that Rory and Helen, his reliable companions, did this. They silently coordinated with Alwyn, dividing the tasks he approached to investigate the Lord, while they would handle the statue and simultaneously find a way to rescue Lucria's parents. When the time came, the glowing stone would be the signal to act. Lucria finally realized the significance of Alwyn asking for more necklaces, not only to stabilize his spirit, but also to give to Helen and Juzi to prevent them from being affected by the magical waves. Thinking he still had a backup card by keeping Jima as a hostage, Viegachar continued to boast arrogantly. However, Alwyn didn't falter at all. He took out a prepared pack of asparagus, Jima's favorite food from before being possessed, and surprisingly stuffed it directly into his mouth. The unexpected food-based awakening proved effective, causing Jima to regain consciousness and his will to return. Viegachar never expected that a seemingly ordinary agricultural product would become the weapon that defeated him. Before he could react, he was hit by Alwyn's powerful punch that sent him flying out, with no chance to return. The next morning, Lucria personally came to see Alwyn off. She gave him the necklace as a protective charm, while placing a light kiss on his cheek that made Juzi and Helen standing behind turn red with jealousy. Lucria also promised to come find Alwyn in the capital when she was old enough, even threatening that if by then he had a girlfriend, she would forcefully break the flower and steal the pot without hesitation. Though touched, Alwyn only had time to nod goodbye before being grabbed by the collar by the 2 behind him, interrogating him for the crime of blatant flirting right in front of them. Another day ended in a way no one anticipated, just like the path that Alwyn, the ex-farmer turned Superman, was continuously walking. This morning, Alwyn was excited when he stepped into the garden to harvest ripe tomatoes that he had cared for himself. Just tasting one, he couldn't help but marvel at the sweet and fresh flavor of the vegetables he had worked hard to grow. One by one, girls like Rory, Falwise, and Helen also came to help Alwyn tend the garden. They not only lent a hand, but also gradually absorbed the agricultural philosophy that Alwyn was always passionate about, seeing farming as an opportunity to both experience life and train physically. While assisting, Princess Falwise secretly observed the necklaces that Rory and Helen were wearing around their necks, special gifts from Alwyn to protect them from evil influences. Falwise herself hadn't received one, which ignited the pride of the princess. When she learned that this jewelry was originally given to Alwyn by Linnea, a resident of Jilu town, she became even more heated because she felt another romantic rival had suddenly appeared from afar. Without hesitation, Falwise decided it was time to force Alwyn to clarify his feelings toward the 3 women pursuing him. While still arguing, the group suddenly heard desperate screaming from the field. Running there, they saw Alwyn troubled by the presence of the 5-clawed vine, an extremely dangerous parasitic plant that specializes in draining nutrients from surrounding crops. For someone passionate about farming like Alwyn, this was the most hateful archenemy. Afterward, the group brought vegetables to sell at the market. Their stall quickly became crowded. While trading, Reeks, an adventurer previously helped by Alwyn, stopped by to buy some celery and lemons for cooking. Since using Alwyn's vegetables, this young man had become addicted to cooking. After Reeks left, a strange figure appeared at the stall. It was the king in disguise. He chose to buy 2 radishes, then offered to recruit Alwyn as his son-in-law, as well as taking on the role of the main agricultural producer for the royal family. Despite the offer coming with extremely attractive conditions, including being equipped with advanced farming tools, Alwyn still refused with a polite smile. Fortunately, Rory intervened in time, pulling Alwyn away from the risk of being brainwashed by the royal family's agricultural development ambitions. Princess Falwise, witnessing everything, became angry and accidentally threw a potato toward Rory. Although Rory dodged it, the potato hit Alwyn's head, causing him to faint on the spot. In his hazy dream, Alwyn sensed the presence of a goddess who only called his name then immediately disappeared. Waking up, Alwyn still didn't understand more but didn't have time to think much because the vegetable stall had sold out completely. He promised to use the profit to buy special herbicide to thoroughly handle the 5-clawed vines. Rory wished him success before leaving to drink tea with Helen, while Falwise followed suit. On the way back, Alwyn met Reeks, who had just completed a mail delivery. He was surprised to see Alwyn's face full of killing intent. Alwyn explained that the field was being seriously damaged. and if not handled soon, all the vegetables would be destroyed. Just then, the two witnessed a little girl being dragged away by strangers as if preparing to sell her into slavery. Alwyn immediately intervened. A thug drew a knife intending to attack, only to be knocked unconscious immediately by him. The remaining one was taken down by Alwyn with just a leg sweep followed by a kick straight to the nape. The ringleader fled in panic. When approaching the girl, Alwyn was surprised to notice small horns on her head. Reeks introduced her as Julia, the demon race princess and daughter of the Demon King. He explained to Julia that Alwyn didn't discriminate based on race, and certainly didn't hate demons, so she could feel at ease. Julia was moved and recounted that while playing in the palace, her caretaker Dumas appeared with a serious expression. He said this place was now extremely dangerous, then immediately activated a forced teleportation magic, bringing her to the human realm, and it was thanks to this that she met Alwyn today. Licht quickly realized something unusual when hearing Julia describe the chaotic situation in the demon realm. However, since that land was located across the ocean, approaching it was extremely difficult. Faced with the urgent situation, Alwyn proactively took responsibility for resolving everything, while asking Licht to stay behind to continue caring for the vegetable garden, using special herbicide to thoroughly handle the destructive 5-clawed vines ruining the crops. Licht intended to prepare a boat to help his friend cross the sea, but Alwyn didn't want to waste time. The fastest option that flashed in his mind was to carry Julia and run across the sea surface using his super speed skill. Julia showed fear at the thought of crossing the ocean without any means of transport, as she only knew how to swim for 3 days then float. Alwyn reassured her, saying the worst thing would only be getting a piece bitten off by some fish. With his extraordinary strength, Alwyn brought Julia to the other shore earlier than expected. Despite being scared throughout the journey, the little girl still felt secure when seeing Alwyn's determined eyes and friendly smile, causing him to suddenly remember the face of Elvia, his adopted sister who had sacrificed herself for him in the past. When both set foot on Demon Race land, the close guard Dumas unexpectedly appeared. Julia was delighted, thinking that the person who had cared for her would protect them. However, contrary to expectations, Dumas suddenly attacked Julia. Alwyn immediately rushed in to shield her, both defending and avoiding the powerful magical attacks. Julia was stunned, not understanding what was happening, why the person she had trusted was now turning against her like this. While blocking the attacks, Alwyn clearly sensed that Dumas wasn't completely in control of his actions. Someone might be controlling him from behind. He then slipped behind, delivering a devastating kick that knocked Dumas unconscious. Julia was still confused when Alwyn decided they needed to quickly move to the Demon King's castle to investigate the truth of the matter. However, before they could leave, Dumas regained consciousness, preparing to launch his strongest attack at Alwyn. At that moment, a woman appeared from nowhere, delivering an extremely powerful punch that knocked Dumas out immediately. It turned out to be Alwyn's mother, who had received an urgent message from Licht, so immediately flew to the demon realm to protect her beloved son. She sighed with relief seeing her son still safe, though he had clearly acted very recklessly by single-handedly infiltrating demon territory. Julia was somewhat cautious seeing the strange woman, but Alwyn's mother reassured her that she had only put Dumas to sleep a bit and hadn't harmed him. Alwyn expressed admiration for Dumas's strength. Though just a childcare servant, he had formidable magical abilities. Julia proudly shared that he was among the strongest mages of the demon race, who always watched over her sleeping, bathed her, and even had a hobby of neatly folding clothes. After hearing this, Alwyn could only secretly hope this Lolican wouldn't wake up too soon. When the group proceeded to the Demon King's castle, Julia was horrified to discover that all the guard soldiers had been killed. She ran quickly to a dying person to ask what happened, but he couldn't say anything more. The tragic scene left Julia extremely confused, while Alwyn's mother began to suspect that some force was manipulating the army, forcing them to massacre each other. Julia anxiously ran to check on her father, the Demon King, who was currently lying unconscious on the floor in critical condition. Alwyn immediately rushed to support him, while questioning another surviving soldier. This person was moved seeing the princess still safe, struggling to speak his final words, warning her to quickly escape from that evil demoness. The woman standing nearby, thought to be Alwyn's mother, suddenly prepared to attack Julia. Fortunately, Alwyn reacted in time, intervening at the right moment, even attacking forcefully to protect Julia. He immediately realized the person before him wasn't his birth mother, because if it were his real mother, she would have rushed to hug him tightly until his bones broke before stopping. This abnormal behavior made Alwyn even more suspicious. As he had predicted, that woman laughed when exposed, admitting that despite disguising herself skillfully, she was still recognized. Afterward, she surprisingly called Alwyn Big Brother before revealing her true form. Alwyn was shocked to see the person standing before him now was none other than Elvia, his adopted sister thought to have died long ago, now present in flesh and blood right before his eyes. Elvia appeared in a completely vivid form, leaving Alwyn stunned. She smiled warmly, saying she had missed him greatly and proudly showed off the magnificent new outfit she was wearing. Countless questions flooded Alwyn's mind as he had witnessed Elvia's passing with his own eyes. Elvia revealed that her return was thanks to the power of a mysterious force, the evil god. She didn't hesitate to praise that great power, claiming that the evil god had swallowed all the suffering and tragedy in the world, opening a new path for her. Elvia continued boasting about the abilities she had just acquired, then suddenly attacked Julia with a strike powerful enough to blow away part of the castle and most of the mountain behind it. The terrible destruction forced Alwyn to immediately unleash his full power to protect Julia, dodging the attacks and reacting so quickly that even Elvia had to admit his speed remained impressive. Although the internal power of the evil god within him remained sealed and unreleased. Unable to understand what was happening, Alwyn continuously questioned Elvia about her words. She revealed that since he possessed the special skill related to Nature Lover, which was actually an ability belonging to the evil god, the power level within him had reached an exceptional threshold. When combined with Alwyn's inherent potential from his earliest days, the whole had created an entity beyond all logic. Nevertheless, he still didn't understand why the evil god had chosen him when they had never had contact. Elvia suggested that if Alwyn agreed to join her side, sharing her belief in the power of darkness, she would reveal the entire truth. She also said they could live together as before the peaceful time the two had once experienced. Alwyn hesitated momentarily before Elvia's mesmerizing gaze. He almost nodded. If Julia hadn't spoken up in time, feeling frightened seeing Elvia coldly choking a small princess like herself without hesitation. He wanted to rush to the rescue, but was blocked by Elvia's power restraining all his movements. She gave a clear condition. If Alwyn would fully accept the evil god's power within his body, those he cherished would be spared. Otherwise, Julia would suffer the consequences first. Just as Elvia was preparing to deliver the finishing blow to Julia, the necklace that Alwyn always wore suddenly glowed intensely, pulling him into a silent space where all movement stopped as if frozen. In that void landscape, a goddess appeared. The one who had been silently watching him before the holy goddess. She explained that she had long been suppressed by the evil god's presence, and only when he wore that necklace could she connect with this world through it for the first time. Since time was temporarily controlled, the holy goddess took the opportunity to grant Alwyn some power to help him control his opponent's movements, while promising to briefly reverse time to give him a chance to save Julia before anything happened. As soon as Alwyn's hand touched the light created by the holy goddess, he felt a pure power flowing throughout his body, pushing back the invading darkness. Time rewound slightly, and Alwyn immediately reacted. Utilizing his newly received power, he summoned a giant forest that grew right under Elvia's feet. Initially, she mocked this technique, considering it just a weak, useless skill, but right after, her entire body was tightly bound by countless strong vines that couldn't be removed. Despite struggling, Elvia couldn't break free from the encirclement. She unleashed a sword created from dark energy and rushed to attack Alwyn. However, he had erected a defensive layer of tightly interwoven grapevines. Though Elvia continuously launched attacks, that plant layer remained impenetrable. Amid the tense situation, Dumas appeared, telling Alwyn to continue restraining Elvia so he could concentrate all his power for a decisive strike. Julia couldn't help but rejoice seeing her familiar guardian had escaped the influence of darkness. However, Dumas's attack seemed to cause no damage to Elvia. She flung Dumas away and prepared to finish him off when she suddenly stopped, realizing her favorite outfit had been torn. Showing annoyance, Elvia decided to temporarily retreat, saying she would return to meet Alwyn privately another time. Immediately after Elvia disappeared, Dumas grabbed Alwyn's collar, demanding to know what relationship he had with Elvia. Julia quickly intervened, saying he had saved her life. The Demon King, Julia's father, who had just arrived, witnessed this scene and intervened, advising Dumas to remain calm and not harm their benefactor. Afterward, he turned to ask Alwyn about Elvia's true identity. Alwyn could only answer that she was his deceased adopted sister, then asked in return about the origin of the evil god. The Demon King admitted that this force was related to his ancestors, but all historical documents had been lost, so he wasn't clear on the details. He promised if he found anything, he would immediately inform him. Julia looked sad when Alwyn said he had to leave. He promised they would definitely meet again. In the moment when the little princess hugged Alwyn as if to hold him back, Dumas standing nearby couldn't contain his jealousy and pulled her away as if fearing Alwyn was plotting something inappropriate with the demon race heir. The Demon King glared disapprovingly, causing Dumas to immediately kneel and bow his head, admitting fault without daring to look up. accepting that he had just acted without consideration. In the kingdom of Merlia, Princess Fallwise decided to leave the palace to find answers to her concerns herself. Before leaving, she silently handed over her role to a trusted maid, asking her to continue disguising herself as the princess to mislead enemies. Unaware that this maid was behaving strangely and seemed not entirely in control of herself, Fallwise quickly departed, carrying her own unexpressed thoughts. Meanwhile, Alwyn was still on his way back after the incident with Elvia. His mind was filled with questions about what Elvia had said, especially about the evil god choosing him as a host. The image of a strange encounter in the past suddenly flooded back, making him confused, unsure if the creature he saw as a child was the evil god or not. Wanting to clarify everything, Alwyn sought out Testa, a close friend who had explored the cave with him years ago. Upon arrival, Alwyn found Testa diligently harvesting tomatoes in the field. After greeting, Alwyn shared about his recent encounter with Elvia and mentioned the cave from years ago where he had lost consciousness in a collapse that led to a volcanic eruption disaster. Testa also didn't have many clear memories because at that time, he was helping Alwyn retreat from the dangerous area. Wanting to ask more about the evil god, Alwyn hesitated and decided to switch to enjoying the ripe tomatoes with Testa to lighten his heart. He invited his friend to the royal capital to relax when he had time. However, Testa declined because he still had to take care of home matters, while slightly smiling in gratitude for the invitation despite being unable to travel far. After saying goodbye, Alwyn returned to the old path, but accidentally got lost in the dense forest. At that moment, a female orc suddenly rushed out and attacked unexpectedly. Although he was prepared, a single punch couldn't defeat it, so Alwyn had to run for his life, until he luckily met Lamia's centipede group who appeared just in time to rescue him. When returning to the Adventurers Guild headquarters, Juji and Helen were shocked to hear that Alwyn couldn't defeat a single orc. Even he himself wasn't clear why he had become so weak. Helen immediately requested a check of Alwyn's ability stats, and the results showed his strength had decreased significantly compared to before. The reason was that after receiving power from the Holy Goddess, the core containing the evil god's power within him was completely buried, causing the nature lover skill to no longer exist. When Helen asked if he knew what had happened, Alwyn just silently refused to explain clearly to avoid making everyone worry more. Helen then reassured that even with decreased stats, Alwyn still far exceeded the standard of a normal adventurer, so there was no need to be too concerned. At that moment, Lick appeared bringing a letter from Alwyn's mother. In the letter, she not only expressed affectionate sentiments, but also lightly warned the two girls Juji and Helen because she knew they were secretly reading her son's private letter. Though the wording was somewhat gentle, the content made both girls cringe, immediately stopping for fear of being misunderstood by Alwyn's mother as planning to enlighten the poor boy. Alwyn's mother mentioned that she was also secretly investigating matters related to the evil god, while noting that if he encountered difficulties or crises, the family door was always open waiting for him to return anytime. After completing his mission, Lick quietly withdrew. Not long after, Fallwise appeared, proactively inviting Alwyn for a walk around town to distract him. However, Juji and Helen immediately intervened, with all three beauties refusing to yield. When they reached a drink shop, each competed fiercely to sit next to Alwyn, causing him to nearly lose his soul in fright before he could finish a sip. Although feeling pressured, Alwyn still tried to be cheerful, blending in with his friends at the small party. In his heart, there were still too many unanswered questions. Why was Elvia still alive? What exactly was the connection between the evil god and the demon race? The world around seemed to be hiding many unrevealed secrets. Nevertheless, Alwyn wasn't afraid. Beside him were always trustworthy friends, teammates who never abandoned each other amid difficulties. Returning to the royal capital as a farmer who never stopped striving, Alwyn told himself he needed to try harder to protect everyone. In another distant place, Elvia was still waiting patiently, directing her gaze toward him with an enigmatic smile, as if the day of reunion would soon approach.